Chapter 31. Volantis. Ocean voyages could drive a man mad with tedium. From the smoking sea to Volantis was 200 leagues, about 960 kilometers. For more than a month, the fleet pressed on through waves and wind, day after monotonous day, until at last they reached the sprawling, boisterous delta at the mouth of the Rhoyne. There, crouched across the sandbanks, rose the vast and majestic city of Volantis. The wide Rhoyne split Volantis in two. The eastern city, home to the old noble bloodlines, was tightly encircled by an elliptical wall of black stone, 200 feet high. The western city was a boiling cauldron of life, merchants, sellsword, prostitutes, thieves, mummers, all crammed into narrow streets and bustling markets, the air heavy with the smells of spices, sweat, and cheap drink. The two halves were joined by a massive bridge, broad enough for two four-wheeled wagons to pass abreast. Once docked, Quen, his wounds fully healed, ordered Jelena to purchase seaworthy ships to replace the worn-out vessel they had salvaged from the ruins of Valyria, and to resupply fresh water and food. Quen himself, together with Janice, planned to visit the slave market. With Janice, her curiosity nearly spilling over, and 30 dragon soul guards as silent as iron shadows, he stepped into the tumult of the western city. The great white stone street had been polished smooth by countless feet. Janice's eyes went wide as she took everything in, hawkers shouting at stalls, performers juggling and tumbling, strangers in bizarre clothes crowding the way. To a girl raised among ruins, the scene was like stepping into a strange and dazzling dream. At the market gates, a few sellswords in faded leather armor, dust-caked and weary, were shouting themselves hoarse, waving a crude wooden placard. Wind-blown company recruiting warriors. High pay. Rare chance. Quen slowed. The wind-blown company. The tattered prince's men. He gave them a longer look. Clearly, business was poor. No matter how hard they shouted, not a soul stopped at their stall. Without lingering, Quen continued on toward the slave market. The stench of sweat hit him the moment he stepped into the square. A broad-faced slaver with jowls like slabs of meat cracked a long whip over a huddle of ragged, gaunt slaves, spitting curses as he drove them forward. When he noticed Quen, his fine clothes, his strikingly youthful eastern face, the lively girl at his side, and behind them 30 armored guards exuding a cold, murderous aura, the slaver's demeanor changed at once. He plastered on a sycophantic grin and trotted forward. Honored master, good day. How may I serve you? Looking for clever servants, or strong backs for hard labor? Quen's eyes swept over the trembling slaves. How many do you have? You've come to the right man, the slaver boasted, chest puffed out. These 200 here are just a sample. Inside the houses, I've got another 1,300. All prime stock, men, women, young, old, from every land. Satisfaction guaranteed. Seeing Quen's expression remain unreadable, the slaver spread 5 stubby fingers, his grin widening. Just 5 golden honors each, fair and square. Quen's gaze chilled. He had once been sold from this very market. Did the man think he didn't know the prices? Volantis's golden honors were small and thin. Worth less than Westeros's golden dragons, yes, but still dearer than silver moons. 1 golden honor per slave. Otherwise, we're done. He made to turn away. Ah, master, wait. The slaver snatched at his sleeve, his face twisting in a show of reluctance mixed with shrewd calculation. 1 golden honor, gods, that's. Well, since you're clearly a man of great means, 1 golden honor each, but you must take the entire lot. All 1,500. Agreed. 1,500. Quen considered. The stepstones were harsh and undeveloped, a large labor force would be essential at the start. He gave a slight nod and gestured behind him. Several dragon soul guards immediately heaved forward over a dozen heavy wooden chests, dropping them with a resounding thud. When the lids were thrown open, the sunlight flashed across piles of golden coins, dazzling the eyes. The slaver reached greedily for them, only to have his hand smacked aside by the cold iron gauntlet of a dragon soul guard. Count them. Money and goods settled. Quen's tone left no room for argument. Yes. Yes. At once. At once. The slaver bowed and scraped, quickly sending men to fetch the captives. Before long, the square was packed with a dense, dark mass of people. The dragon soul guards worked with flawless efficiency, silently and precisely counting, exactly 1,500 slaves. Quen's gaze swept over the numb, terrified faces of the crowd, Lizarian, Dothraki, dark-skinned natives of the Summer Isles, islanders from the Basilisk Isles. Then, suddenly, his eyes fixed on several figures huddled in a corner. Black hair. Dark eyes. Eastern features. Lo Quen strode over and spoke in pure Yiti tongue. You are from Yiti. The slaves shuddered, their faces showing a jumble of fear and confusion. One man, perhaps in his 30s, stepped forward under the weight of the other's stares. His clothes were ragged, but they could not hide a quiet dignity. His eyes were not as lifeless as the rest, they held a cautious, measuring watchfulness. Yes, my lord, he said, bowing slightly. His Yitish was flawless. We are all from Yiti. Where in Yiti? And why are you here? Lo Quen pressed. The man gestured toward himself and those behind him. I am Luo Wen, from Yin. They are my retainers and maids, from Jinki, Tiki, and Leng. We were merchants trading between the Jade Sea and the Summer Sea. While resupplying on Noth, we were caught in a conflict between local lords. Our guards were slain, our goods seized, and we were taken captive, sold here to Volantis. He told the tale of his misfortune with a startling calmness, as if recounting something that had not happened to him at all. Luo Wen. Lo Quen silently committed the name to memory. His gaze moved to the Yiti slaves behind Luo Wen, 2 men and 3 women. The 2 young men, about 20 years old, stood tall and straight, their muscles taut and coiled like leopards ready to spring. Of the 3 women, 2 were 17 or 18, plain in appearance, with the dull exhaustion common among slaves. The third was a girl about Lo Quen's age, her face marred by dark red, twisted scars crisscrossing across her features, leaving only a pair of calm black eyes. Lo Quen gave a slight nod, signaling the Dragon Soul guards to take them all back to the harbor. He and Janice then turned away from the noisy slave market. What is it? Janice, sharp as ever, sensed something off. Nothing, Lo Quen smiled, shaking his head to reassure her. But in his heart, suspicion churned. Just moments ago, when his eyes had fallen on those Yiti slaves, he had caught the faintest trace of magical fluctuation. It was subtle, hidden. Had he not just arrived in Volantis, he might have suspected assassins of the faceless men slipping among them. Lo Quen chose not to reveal it. Even if they were unusual, they posed no threat to him now. Still, curiosity stirred. Who exactly were these Yiti people carrying traces of magic? The 2 returned to the bustling harbor. Jelena had worked with striking speed. A brand new sailing ship with towering masts was already moored nearby, its great sails swelling and snapping in the sea breeze. On the dock, Dragon Soul guards bustled like tireless ants, moving piles of supplies from the old ship to the new. Even the heavy, mysterious black stone had been tightly wrapped in thick linen and was being carefully carried into the new hold by several guards. Lo Quen told Janice to return to the cabin and meet her sister, while he stayed on deck to oversee the slaves' boarding and the final cargo transfers. Just then, a shrill, frenzied female voice cut through the noise of the port, stabbing at the eardrums. Gaze upon the stars. Stars blot the sun. The long night has no end. Doom is here. Lo Quen turned toward the sound. Not far away, atop a crude platform of stacked wooden crates, stood a woman clad in black and crimson robes. Her hair hung loose, her eyes wild and vacant as she flung her bony arms about, shrieking at the bewildered or mocking crowd below. Awaken, O Master. Break the chains. Let blood be the sea. Cleanse this world. Lo Quen frowned, muttering under his breath, raving lunatic, what nonsense is this? Make way, make way. A rough voice suddenly sounded at his side. Lo Quen glanced over to see a squat, barrel-shaped old man grinning oddly as he shoved his way through the crowd, pushing closer. Chapter 32. Marwyn the Mage. The man was so unkempt he drew every eye. His neck was thick as a bull's, his jaw heavy as a whetstone. A round, swollen belly jutted forward, absurdly paired with a chest and shoulders that were broad and solid. Coarse white hairs, like stubborn weeds, sprouted defiantly from his large ears and wide nostrils. But it was his face that lingered in memory. His forehead jutted out unnaturally high, his nose broken more than once and now crooked, caved in at the bridge. When he grinned, his twisted smile revealed teeth stained a dark red, as though steeped in blood by some sour herbal juice. The old man ambled over to Lo Quen, listening with interest to the red priestess's hoarse, frenzied cries from atop the platform. After a while, his small, sly eyes shifted slowly toward Lo Quen, his throat rasping as he spoke. Eastern boy, I'd wager you come from Yiti. Lo Quen gave a slight nod, keeping his manners. Yes, sir. Ah. The old man let out a sharp, cryptic sound, shaking his shaggy head with a knowing air. Then you shouldn't linger long in this cursed place. Trust me, I wandered the east for years, far more comfortable than here. He dragged out the word, comfortable, his tone hinting at much left unsaid. Quen didn't press him, but turned his gaze back to the Red Priestess waving her arms on the platform. Do you know what she's saying? The old man's face darkened at once, like the sea before a storm. If I were you, he muttered low, his tone edged with warning, I'd keep my mouth shut and pretend I heard nothing. Sail from the Jade Sea toward the Summer Sea, and you'll see plenty of their kind in the port cities. They call themselves the Church of Starry Wisdom, also the Cult of Starry Wisdom. When I lived in Ashai, I often saw their priests atop towers, staring at the stars to divine omens. On nights full of stars, they'd sometimes chant together, strange songs and prayers that kept me awake. He spat with open disgust. Best keep your distance, boy, especially since you're Yiti. What's wrong with being from Yiti? Quen's brows knit tightly. The old man stared, startled, his small eyes flying wide as he looked Quen up and down. What? You don't know. Their first priest was the Bloodstone Emperor, the one who brought the long night, dripping blood from every pore. He founded this cult and spread ruin everywhere. Back when I was in Yin, even 3-year-olds on the street could hum a bit of that tale. His voice was thick with disbelief. Quen's heart gave a jolt, but his face stayed calm as he lied smoothly. I traveled the west with merchant caravans since childhood. I never had the chance to return to Yiti. Inwardly, he frowned. The body's original owner had only been a village smith's apprentice, spending his days at the anvil and forge. His parents had died young, leaving no one to teach him such things. As for the plot details he recalled from his past life, he could hardly remember them all. The old man narrowed his eyes, studying him. The youth's silk robes were spotless, sharply pressed. Staring at that eastern face, Marwyn felt a flicker of memory stir from his own years spent in the further east. He asked roughly, so then, boy of Yiti, are you bound for that distant, unfamiliar home, or will you stay in this glittering world? Home. The word struck a raw nerve. Quen's mind held only the ruins of a village drowned beneath Dothraki war cries. He watched the sharp-tongued old man warily, choosing not to answer. His eyes instead slid to the necklace dangling from the man's greasy neck, a chain of interlinked metal rings that caught the sunlight and shone with the glint of knowledge. Quen's gaze froze for a moment. Realization dawned instantly, and he smoothly switched to fluent common. Master, forgive my boldness. The design of the necklace around your neck, could it be a maester's chain from the citadel of Westeros? Are you from the Seven Kingdoms? The old man blinked, then burst into a loud, foul-smelling laugh, laced with wine and bitter herbs. Ha ha ha. Sharp eyes. I haven't even introduced myself yet, name's Marwyn. I'm a archmaester from the citadel. Marwyn. Quen's heart jolted, though he kept his face calm. That name carried serious weight in the fragments of memory from the original story. This man wasn't an ordinary maester. Marwyn was a key figure in the original work. Unlike most of the Citadel's maesters, he didn't reject magic. On the contrary, he was obsessed with it, deeply devoted to studying the arcane and the unknown. Quen clearly remembered the details about him. Qyburn had once told Jaime that among all the Citadel's archmaesters, only Marwyn entertained the idea of ghosts. He also called the rest of the maesters, grey-robed sheep. After an 8-year journey through the further east, Marwyn returned to Aldtown, where Archmaester Violin, nicknamed Vinegar, mockingly dubbed him Marwyn the Mage. Marwyn himself suspected the Citadel had played a shady role in the extinction of House Targaryen's dragons. All signs pointed to a deep divide, perhaps even a schism, between him and the rest of the Citadel. Quen couldn't help but think, if he could secure such an experienced scholar as an advisor while establishing himself in the Stepstones, it would be a tremendous advantage. But the Citadel only assigned maesters to legitimate lords of the Seven Kingdoms. There was no way they'd send one to assist a foreigner who posed a potential threat to Westeros. Aside from Qyburn, the only maester Quen could possibly approach was this very man, Archmaester Marwyn, who only maintained the thinnest of ties with the Citadel. And besides, an archmaester was far more capable than an ordinary maester. Only those who had mastered a subject to an exceptional degree were granted the title of archmaester. Marwyn had no idea that the moment he said his name, Quen had already marked him as someone he must recruit. Quen gave him a sincere smile tinged with respect. Esteemed Archmaester Marwyn, my name is Quen. It's an honor to meet you today. If the opportunity arises in the future, may I visit the Citadel in Aldtown to pay my respects. Marwyn nodded, clearly enjoying the Eastern youth's respectful tone. The Citadel's doors are always open to seekers of knowledge. So, you're not planning to return to the sacred grounds. No, Archmaester. I plan to travel through Westeros first, Quen replied calmly. Marwyn grinned, revealing dark red teeth. A living Yiti native in Westeros. Ha! That's rarer than seeing a live dragon. Have you ever seen a dragon, Archmaester? Quen asked, seizing the moment. Dragons. Marwyn shook his head, his eyes flickering with a scholar's hunger. No, but I've seen their bones. And if corpses could speak, they'd agree with me. You showing up in Westeros is going to make waves. His tone carried a peculiar dark humor. Quen laughed. Archmaester, I imagine your sense of humor must be well loved at the Citadel. Loved. Marwyn reacted like someone had stepped on his tail. He flailed his short arms, nearly spraying Quen with spit. Those gray-robed sheep would have preferred I drowned out east, feeding the fish. If I ever returned alive, all that awaited me was a room full of sour barbs and a pile of cruel nicknames. That's how they comfort themselves when their schemes fail. His bitterness was practically tangible. Quen smirked inwardly but kept a sympathetic look on his face. Sounds like things aren't exactly harmonious with your colleagues. Worse than terrible. Marwyn snapped, jaw tight as stone. A sly curve lifted Quen's lips. Archmaester, you may not believe this, but my intuition is usually spot on. I think I can guess what nickname they gave you. Oh. Marwyn leaned forward, curiosity fully piqued, his murky eyes fixed on Quen. He even held his breath. Say it, what is it? Quen lowered his voice, a mischievous glint in his smile, and clearly spoke the title etched by fate. Marwyn, the Mage. Chapter 33. First Encounter with Pirates. The pungent stench clinging to Archmaester Marwyn finally faded as he staggered off. Quen returned to the cabin, where Jelena had already finished all the handover procedures with brisk efficiency. Dragon Soul Guards were directing the hundreds of newly recruited sailors onto the ships, the harbor alive with activity. Lord, everything is ready. Jelena gave her report crisply. 30 new merchant ships, 11 flatboats, 5 swan ships, and the rest large sailing vessels. The total cost came to nearly 250,000 golden honors. Quen nodded. The treasures he had taken from Tyria and the King of the Rock were more than enough to cover such expenses. He gave the order to set sail at once. The great fleet raised its sails and left the bustling port of Volantis, heading straight for the chaotic stepstones. The stepstones lay some 400 leagues away, twice the distance from the smoking sea to Volantis. But with the superior speed of the new ships, the skill of the hired sailors, and the favor of wind and current, the fleet moved with astonishing swiftness. In less than a month, they reached the southern waters of the Stepstones. Quen stood at the bow of a sleek swan ship, a Myrish lens pressed to his eye as he scanned the channel ahead for reefs suitable for anchorage. His brow tightened suddenly. At the edge of his lens, several tiny black specks were quickly growing larger. 4 narrow, fast-oared warships were closing in on a small merchant vessel. Pirates. The 4 pirate ships moved in a wedge, their unmatched maneuverability hemming the merchantmen in tight. Ballistae and crude catapults roared from their prows, loosing stones and thick bolts like hail upon the trapped ship. The merchant crew scrambled in panic, desperately working the sails. Catching a strong crosswind, they broke free and fled, straight toward Quen's fleet. Just as the swan ship ahead on Quen's right tried to maneuver clear, the terrified merchant vessel, like a runaway horse, smashed into its side with a thunderous crash. Damn it! Quen's face hardened as he ordered his own swan ship to close at full speed. The sight of the collision was chaos. The merchant ship's hatch gaped open, spilling panicked passengers and crew in plain clothes. It was clearly just an ordinary passenger vessel. As Quen's ship drew near, Jelena and her sister already had the Dragon Soul Guards throwing a gangplank swiftly across the gap. The moment Quen stepped onto the damaged swan ship, frightened sailors rushed up to plead, Lord. The ship was moving too fast with the tailwind, Quen cut them off with a wave, his gaze stabbing toward the huddled crowd on the merchant deck. Where is the captain? The crowd parted. A middle-aged man with a square face and neatly trimmed gray beard, bearing the typical look of the free cities, shuffled forward, trembling. He collapsed to his knees with a thud, tears and snot streaming. Lord, spare me. It wasn't my fault. Quen vaulted the gunwale and landed before him, his voice like ice. Your name. Where are you from? Where were you bound? Why were those 4 ships surrounding and attacking you? My name is Ternasio Teres, captain of the Titan's daughter, the man stammered. We sailed from Bravos, bound for Lee. We never expected to be ambushed by pirates so soon after passing the stepstones. Lo Quen sneered. And so you rammed your ship into my fleet. Not me. I swear it wasn't me. Ternasio flailed his hands in terror. It was my order. A deep, resonant voice rolled out from the shadows of the cabin. Lo Quen turned toward the sound. A burly, middle-aged man stepped slowly into the light. A burly, dark-skinned man with thick hair stepped out, gripping a sword still streaked with fresh blood. He wore only a breastplate, no helmet, his slightly thinning brown hair exposed. His eyes burned with wariness, fixed on Lo Quen. From the depths of his pupils flashed a predatory light, like a beast coiled to strike. The passengers shrank back in awe, clearing a path for him. Lo Quen's gaze hardened as he slowly drew the Valyrian steel sword he had taken from Terry's. The blade was etched with dense, swirling runes that clung to its mirror-cold steel, glinting with a pale, ghastly light. He leveled the sword's point at the man. State your name. I've no wish to kill a nameless wretch. The man's eyes flicked to the weapon, a trace of shock flickering deep within them. He scowled, sizing up the young black-haired challenger before him, and sneered. Boy, if your swordplay proves worthy of the blade you hold, then I'll tell you my name. He raised his sword across his chest, settling into a steady stance. At that instant, whoosh, crack, a siege bolt as thick as a child's arm tore through the air with a deathly scream and slammed into the merchant ship's hull. Splinters exploded like a storm, the vessel shuddered violently, and panicked screams ripped through the air once more. Lo Quen's eyes cut toward the four-oared ships. They lingered 200 yards off, slyly using their range to harass from afar. Figures shifted on their decks, the shouts of crews reloading ballistae and catapults, mixed with the pirates, jeering curses, carried clearly across the water. Jelena. Lo Quen's voice rang sharp. Order all swan ships and galleons to grapple them head-on. Flatboats form the outer cordon, don't let a single one escape. Understood. Jelena's eyes blazed with battle fury, her armor flashing in the sun. The swan ships and galleons, massive and durable, lacked the maneuverability of the nimble-oared ships. Encirclement was their only answer. As the heavy ships swung in from the flanks, the four-oared vessels churned the water in a frenzy, trying to rip through the closing net with speed, all while focusing their fire on the two swan ships leading the charge. Stones whistled against fresh oak planks, leaving deep pits. Thick bolts slammed into the gunwales, tile feathers quivering. But the new timbers were thick and resilient, and the pirates' hurried shots did little more than scratch the surface. They could not halt the tightening noose. One swan ship, using its bulk, rammed hard into an oared vessel that was trying to veer away. The impact sent the smaller ship lurching, oars snapping, pirates shrieking as they tumbled. Before the gangplank had even settled, a figure vaulted the rail, Jelena. Her form was encased in Valyrian steel, the matching blade in her hand blurring like a phantom. The deck of the oared ship was crowded with nearly 100 pirates, ragged men clutching short swords. For an instant they froze at the sight of a lone warrior leaping across. Then, with howls of bloodlust, they rushed her. What greeted them was slaughter. Jelena's swordsmanship was already tempered through endless drills, but with the strength and speed of the Dragonblood pact, she was a weapon made flesh. Her blade sang with a savage beauty, no technique, only raw, merciless power. It flashed as a silver streak too fast to follow. Crude blades snapped like twigs. Shabby leather and thin iron shattered like paper before the Valyrian steel. Where her sword passed, arms and legs flew, blood sprayed in mist. Each step she took was punctuated by screams and the thud of bodies crashing to the deck. The pirates' ferocity proved laughably fragile against such overwhelming force, speed, and the bite of a god-forged blade. Expressionless, Jelena cut through them like death in a wheat field, reaping without pause, forcing a bloody path through the press of bodies. She alone was enough to shatter the pirates' morale. Moments later, a dozen dragon soul guards vaulted the rail in silence. Clad in steel, they moved with precision, each step heavy and sure. In their hands, Valyrian steel swords wove a moving forest of death. Desperate counterstrikes skittered harmlessly off their armor, leaving only faint scratches. Every thrust, every sweep, claimed a life. Tight in formation, they pushed forward behind Jelena's breach, crushing the last of the resistance without mercy. The deck was soon littered with corpses and the wails of the wounded. The pirates on the first oared ship broke completely. Survivors wailed, flinging their weapons aside and dropping to their knees, begging for mercy. Chapter 34. The Exiled Great Bear. On the other side, Janice led the assault on another oared ship that had been surrounded. After nearly 2 months of training, the timidity in her eyes had been replaced by firm resolve. The Flame Knight's transformation had given her strength and reflexes beyond those of ordinary men. Though her swordsmanship was nowhere near her sister's refined mastery, her speed and raw power more than made up for it. Wearing fitted Valyrian steel light armor, she gripped her sword tightly. Her young face was tense, but there was no trace of retreat. Several pirates, seeing her youth and beauty, and that she charged at the front, sneered with contempt and lunged at her with jeers. Flirting with death. Janice silently recalled her sister's teachings. Moving with the grace of a cat, she sidestepped a slashing short sword and drove her steel blade upward in a swift, vicious strike. Ah! The leading pirate screamed, clutching his wrist as his severed hand and sword fell to the deck, blood spraying everywhere. Another pirate attacked from the side. Janice couldn't turn in time, so she dropped low and unleashed a sweeping kick. Fueled by the strength of the Flame Knight, her leg cracked like a steel whip. Snap! Bone gave way, and the pirate's shin shattered. He collapsed, rolling on the deck with a shriek. A third pirate swung an axe down at her. Instead of retreating, Janice stepped in, her sword darting like a viper to stab directly into his elbow joint. His arm went numb, the axe slipped from his grasp, and Janice followed with a powerful kick that sent him sprawling. Whenever the pirates tried to surround her, she swiftly retreated back into the tight formation of the dragon soul guards behind her. With their silent protection and ruthless finishing strikes, Janice fought like a young dragon testing its claws for the first time, still green, but already sharp enough to draw blood. The resistance on the second Ord ship collapsed quickly. On the remaining two ships, the pirates watched their comrades butchered like lambs. Faced with Yelena's inhuman strength and the Dragon Soul Guard's cold, efficient slaughter, terror hollowed them out. The pirate captain, seeing their escape cut off by the galleons and the boarding fight turn into a one-sided massacre, dropped his weapon without hesitation. Raising both hands, he screamed, "We surrender! We surrender! Stop the killing!" On the merchant ship's deck, the cries and clash of distant battle became little more than background noise. Quen's eyes stayed locked on the burly man before him. The pirates had been cut down by Yelena and the others as easily as chopping melons. Now, the only thing left was to make this defiant man, who had dared ram his fleet with such arrogance, pay the price. At the same time, this fight would be the perfect whetstone to test his command of power and the progress of his martial skill. Quen let out a sharp cry. The deck beneath his feet seemed to shudder as his body shot forward like an arrow from the string. His rune-ched Valyrian steel sword came down in a brutal arc, aimed straight for the man's skull. The man's pupils contracted sharply. That speed, that strength, far beyond his expectations. He dared not hesitate. Instincts honed by years of life and death struggle snapped into action. His body slid aside in a flawless sidestep, his wrist flicking as his longsword thrust with deadly precision at the tendons of Quen's sword hand. Strike where he must defend, force him to break his attack. It was the move of a veteran who had clawed his way through countless battles. Quen felt a flicker of admiration, his suspicion about the man's identity sharpening further. He wrenched back his slash, twisting his wrist with serpent-like agility. His Valyrian steel sword carved a sharp arc, striking the man's blade aside with a piercing clang. The rebound jolted through the man's arm, numbing his grip. He staggered back 3 steps before he steadied himself, his eyes now wide with shock. This boy's strength was beyond human. Quen pressed the attack without pause, his sword surging forward in relentless waves. He no longer relied solely on brute force, but began weaving in the refined swordwork Yelena had taught him, blending it with his raw power. The Valyrian steel blade whirled in his hands, a storm of deadly steel. The fusion of speed and strength made every strike scream with death. The burly man, in turn, brought his lifetime of battle-hardened skill to bear. Knowing he was outmatched in strength, he avoided clashing directly, instead using precise footwork and deflection. Like a rock in storming seas, he endured. He moved with agility, slipping past Quen's crushing blows at the last instant. His sword stuck close, guiding or redirecting. Using the blade's spine, he turned aside the force of the strikes, and in the briefest gaps between Quen's transitions, he launched lightning-fast counters, each aimed at vital points. Quen was forced to guard again and again. His swordplay was stripped of flourish, simple, ruthless, and lethal. It was the art of survival, carved out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Clang, 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 clang. The sharp, rapid clash of steel rang out across the merchant ship's deck, sparks flying with each strike. The two fighters moved like lightning, swordlight weaving around them. In moments, they had already traded dozens of fierce blows. Quen's strength and speed gave him a crushing advantage, yet the man's seasoned experience and razor-sharp precision let him seize narrow openings again and again. More than once, he nearly punished the tiny lapses in Quen's control, forced by his surging power, with deadly counters. The man's sheer martial skill and depth of battle experience left Quen both increasingly awed, and increasingly exhilarated, as the fight raged on. He felt it, under the crushing intensity of battle, his control over his surging strength, his grasp of swordplay and its integration, were sharpening at a pace he had never known before. At last, after one more violent clash of steel, Quen caught it, the barest hesitation in the burly man's movements, a flaw born of exhaustion. His eyes flashed. Abandoning flourish, he poured every ounce of strength into his arms. The Valyrian steel sword roared like a dragon breaking its chains, ripping through the air with unstoppable force, aimed square at the man's chest. The man's face drained of color. He felt death rushing toward him. His chestplate might as well have been parchment before Valyrian steel. Instinct drove him to raise his blade across his body, desperate to catch the blow. But, crack, the sound of shattering steel ripped the air. The longsword that had carried him through a lifetime of battle snapped clean into the instant it met Quen's blade. The black edge slowed only for a heartbeat, still driving forward with irresistible sharpness, plunging straight for his heart. Life on a knife's edge. The man's survival instincts exploded like a cornered beast. He hurled himself backward, spine arched to its limit, heels slamming against the deck with all his might, flinging his bulk away as though yanked by some unseen force. Rip. The sword point ripped through his armor and carved a deep gash across the hard muscle of his chest. Hot blood sprayed like a fountain, drenching his torn armor and spattering the deck beneath his feet. Ugh! The man grunted in pain, stumbling back 7-8 steps before slamming into the railing with a bone-jarring crash. Agony twisted his face, veins bulging across his forehead, sweat pouring as his breath rasped like a bellows. The broken sword sagged uselessly in his grip, blood dripping down the hilt. Quen did not follow. With a flick of his wrist, his bloodied Valyrian steel sword tilted downward, its tip dripping scarlet onto the deck. His gaze was cold as winter, fixed on his trembling, blood-soaked foe. His voice cut like the wind off the wall. Now, do I have the right to know your name? Or are the warriors of Westeros all nameless men? The words struck home. The man stared at Quen's young face, then dropped his eyes to the wound pouring blood across his chest, to the broken blade at his feet, the weapon that had borne his life's battles, now in ruins. Shock faded, replaced by a storm of emotions. Bitterness. Resignation. Defeat. And, buried within, the faint relief of meeting an equal at last. He drew in a deep breath, bracing against the pain. With all the strength left in him, he straightened his massive frame, scarred and battered like a wounded bear. Though his skin had gone pale from blood loss, the pride of the North, the pride of House Mormont, flared again in his shadowed eyes like a fire rekindled. Jorah Mormont. The voice was low, rough, yet steady. Once Lord of Bear Island. Now an exiled knight. He met Quen's gaze without flinching, speaking each word with weight. You win, boy. Chapter 35, Capturing Jorah. As Quen had suspected, his guess was right. The moment he saw the man's thick, curling beard, his distinctive breastplate, and the hardened swordplay flashing in those dark, somber eyes, his identity was all but certain. In Westeros, there were few who carried such marks, and none of them should have been on the narrow sea. Only Jorah Mormont, the knight once anointed with holy oil but driven into exile for selling slaves, fit the likeness. By now the cries of pirates in the distance had quieted. Quen turned back to Jorah, his voice calm yet edged with unquestionable authority. Sir Jorah, I think you owe me an explanation. Why did you ram my ship? Jorah Mormont raised his blood-stained face, his eyes fierce like a wounded bear. We were surrounded by pirates. This was the only way out. If you hadn't been in our path, we might have escaped. So it was our fault for being in your way. Quen's brows lifted slightly. Jorah pressed a blood-soaked hand to his side, his breath ragged. It was desperation. If our places were switched, you'd have done the same. Enough. Quen cut him off, his tone turning cold. You are my prisoner now, Esser. Remember your place. Prisoner. Jorah's frown deepened, the stubbornness of the North etched in his face. Better give me a clean death. Before he could finish, a striking figure rushed from the cabin. She wore a pale yellow silk gown of obvious luxury, her voluminous golden hair bound by a sapphire-studded net. Her features were delicate, her makeup immaculate, her milk-white skin made all the more striking by the glittering crystal necklace at her throat. When she saw Jorah slumped on the deck, his chest stained with blood, her face went pale as she hurried to him. Jorah, are you hurt? At the sight of her, Jorah's hard expression softened instantly. Linus, I'm fine. Go back inside, the deck is no place for you. But before the words left his lips, a gush of blood spilled from his mouth, draining the color from his face. Linus recoiled in shock, stumbling back. She snatched a silk handkerchief to cover her nose and mouth, terrified the stench of blood would cling to her costly gown and perfumes. Her lovely face first twisted with fright, then shifted into a faint, calculating look. Her voice grew sharp. You call this nothing? Quickly. Jorah, give me the key to the strongbox. I must go to Lee to fetch the best healer for you. Jorah's eyes darkened. This woman cared nothing for whether he lived or died. She had merely scented death in the air and wanted to claim his last wealth. Sweet memories tangled with bitter ruin. His ruined exile had been, in truth, her doing. He had broken the law to sell slaves, all to cover Linus's extravagance. He had left Bravos for Lee because she had complained she wanted somewhere warm. And now the lady he had once doted on showed her cold heart without disguise. Failure crashed down on Jorah like a flood of ice water, robbing him of breath. This must be Lady Mormont, Quen spoke at last. He had recognized her the moment she stepped out. Linus Hightower, the famed spendthrift of Aldtown. Seeing her true face, Quen, though still resentful toward Jorah, cut across her scheming. Forgive my bluntness, my lady, but you cannot go to Lee. Essos Jorah rammed my fleet and dragged us into a needless battle. To atone, from this moment you are both my prisoners. Linus's eyes widened in terror at Quen's foreign features. Glancing at the towering dragon soul guards behind him, she stammered, You cannot. My father is Leyden Hightower, Lord of Aldtown. Quen inclined his head. I know. And I also know Essos Jorah is still a knight in exile from the Seven Kingdoms. For selling slaves, he was sentenced to death by the great Lord of Winterfell. Consider this, if I deliver you to Lord Stark, do you think he won't reward me richly? Linus's face went ashen. Thinking of her family's vast fortune, she cried out desperately, Let me write to my father. He will ransom me. I don't want to go back to the north, send me home to Aldtown. Jorah looked at his wife, collapsed in tears, caring nothing for his wounds and thinking only of her return. A bitter, broken smile tugged at his lips. Let her go. I am yours to deal with. He turned his eyes to Quen, filled with desperate plea. At those words, a spark of hope lit instantly in Linus's eyes. She stared at Quen with urgent expectation. I cannot grant your request, Essos Jorah. Nor yours, Lady Mormont. Quen's refusal was cold and final. He knew Jorah Mormont's reputation as a lapdog. To release Linus would be no different from loosing a tiger. Jorah would surely seize the first chance to flee. Only by keeping the woman he worshipped most tightly in hand could this bear of the north be made to bow. For the journey ahead, we shall, properly, see to your needs. He gave weight to the word, properly, then signaled to the dragon soul guards at his side. Take them to the flagship. Place them in the best quarters, and see to Essos Jorah's wounds. Jorah's wound was not deep, but the blood loss was perilous enough. As the two were led away, staggering under guard, Quen turned to the trembling Ternasio. Now, you may leave. Ternasio all but collapsed in relief, barking frantic orders to his crew to adjust the sails. He wanted nothing more than to flee this cursed place as quickly as possible. Back aboard the flagship Swan, Jaelina and Janis appeared with a middle-aged man bound tight, his chestnut beard and hair matted from the struggle. Jaelina removed her helmet, revealing her beautiful, cold features. My lord, 4 pirate Ord ships destroyed. 107 killed. 178 pirates captured. 170 sailors taken. Her eyes shifted to the prisoner. This one was their leader. Quen nodded, studying the man's defeated expression. Tell me your name. Roro Uhoris, my lord, the man answered wearily. From Tirosh. I smuggle, sometimes turn pirate. He dared a glance at Quen, fear and confusion in his eyes. He had been raiding a merchant vessel when it collided with a fleet from the south. At first he thought fortune had smiled, to prey at once. Instead, he had slammed into iron. Even now, he could not understand how he had run afoul of such a well-armed and disciplined fleet. Roro Uhoris. The name stirred something in Quen's memory. He seemed to recall it from the original tale. And he needed a guide through the treacherous waters of the Stepstones. How well do you know the Stepstones? Quen asked. A spark of desperation lit in Roro's eyes. I know them like my own hand, my lord. Every reef, every island, every sea cave fit to hide a ship, I know them all. Good. Lo Quen's tone was level, but edged with steel. Your life is spared, but you will serve as my guide into the stepstones. If even one ship in my fleet runs aground on a reef. He paused. I will take one of your fingers. Roro went pale, then suddenly trembled harder as another thought struck him. My lord. There is something, when I set out, I borrowed ships and men from Crab Claw, of Torturer's Deep. If I do not return on time, he will kill my family. Crab Claw. The pirate chief of Torturer's Deep, Roro said quickly. He commands 3 great warships and 17 oared vessels. Of the 4 ships I brought, 3 and most of their crews were his. Every raid, we must hand over most of the spoils to him. How many men does he command? Excluding sailors, around 2,000 cutthroats. Lo Quen fell silent in thought. 2,000 pirates sounded daunting, but without armor or discipline, they were nothing more than sheep before his well-equipped, battle-trained dragon soul guards. How far to Torturer's Deep? Catching the dangerous gleam in Lo Quen's eyes, Roro knew no good would come of it, yet dared not lie. North, 2 to 300 li. Just beyond the bird dung pillar. Lo Quen's gaze flicked to the sisters. It seems we've another battle ahead. Jelena said nothing, her hand resting quietly on her sword hilt. Janice gave a faint nod. Fresh from her first true battle, she felt no pity for these murderous thieves of the sea. Chapter 36. Night Raid on Torturer's Deep. Guided by Roro Uhoris, the fleet pressed northward. 4 captured rowboats were handed over to the Dragon Soul Guards, trailing close behind the flagship. The vessels had taken a severe beating in the earlier clash, their planks split, gunwales crushed, like old sharks stripped of their teeth. Roro winced at the sight of his own worst damaged rowboat. Lord, these ships, especially my Cobblecat. After this voyage, it'll need a full overhaul. Otherwise, it won't survive another run. He pointed to the gaping hole torn into the vessel's side. Don't be fooled by its size. She's still faster than the other 3 when she runs. Cobblecat. Lo Quen's eyes lingered on the battered boat, his brows knitting as a buried name stirred in his memory. What's your connection to the blind bastard, Roro Uhoris? You share the same name, and even the same ship. Roro stiffened, his chestnut beard shadowing a face that grew hard to read. After a pause, he muttered, he was my father. Over 10 years ago, the Night's Watch hanged him at East Watch by the sea. Since then, I've kept his ship's name alive, the Cobblecat. You want revenge. But your father broke the laws of the 7 kingdoms. Lo Quen caught the flash of hatred in Roro's eyes and spoke without pretense. That blind bastard, Roro Uhoris had been a notorious smuggler and pirate in the narrow sea, selling arms to the wildlings until the Night's Watch fleet seized and executed him. Roro's beard lifted as his eyes hardened with defiance. To hell with the 7 kingdoms' laws. He was still my father. As they spoke, the sky grew heavy. A deep indigo veil pressed low, gull cries torn apart by the sea wind. Jagged black reefs loomed ahead like the fangs of monsters, surfacing silently in the channel. The stepstones teemed with scattered isles and hidden reefs. To those who didn't know the waters, grounding and wreckage were almost certain. Roro straightened, calling out to sailors familiar with the passage, steering the fleet as if threading a needle, slipping past trap after trap. When a solitary stone pillar rose into view, 70 or 80 feet high and caked in thick, dark guano, Roro pointed to it. Lord, that's the bird droppings pillar. Torturer's Deep lies just beyond. Drop sail, hold the ships, Lo Quen ordered at once. We wait until the night deepens. The fleet drifted like ghosts on the dark sea, from sunsets, hour of the bat, into the dead stillness of, hour of the wolf. The night hung thick as grease, starshine smothered by heavy cloud. Only thin shards of moonlight pierced the gaps, scattering broken silver across the waves. The steady thump of water against the hull droned low and dull, veiling the violence to come. Move. Lo Quen's voice carried clear and firm among those at his side. Under Roro's guidance, the fleet slipped past the stinking bird droppings pillar until Torturer's Deep bared its face. Before them, 2 immense black cliffs soared hundreds of feet high, sheer as if split by a giant's axe. Millennia of waves and wind had chewed their inner walls into a chaos of cracks, jagged ledges, and honeycombed holes, leaving only a narrow, twisted fissure. That fissure was the sole channel into Torturer's Deep. Across it, massive winches pulled thick iron chains taut, forming a crude but solid gate. From the stern of the Swan, Lo Quen fixed his gaze on the chasm swallowing dark. Then he turned to Roro, a smile tugging at his mouth. Roro, want to save your family. This is your chance. Roro froze, his chestnut beard trembling. Lord, what are you saying? Your 4 ships will lead. I'll go in with you and my men, Quen said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. At the gate, tell the Crab Claw crew you've returned heavy with spoils, and that you found a fat merchant ship adrift. Convince them to lower the chain. Do it well, your tongue now carries the lives of your family, your Tirosh sailors, and yourself. The color drained from Roro's face, but in its place surged a reckless, cornered ferocity. He understood, this was the only path forward. Drawing a long breath, he straightened his hunched back, eyes flashing with the cunning and ruthlessness of a man with nothing left to lose. Understood, Lord. I'll make that fool Crab Claw open the gates himself. A disguised merchant vessel was quickly chosen. Quen boarded the first rowboat with Roro, Jelena, and all the Dragon Soul Guards, leaving Janice to guard the rest. The Dragon Soul Guards wore sailors' garb over their armor and hung a few captured, ragged merchant flags as marks of spoils. Roro stood at the bow, forcing his breath steady, smothering his fear as he tried to summon the arrogance of a pirate captain. Several pirate rowboats hugged close behind the Cobblecat as they glided noiselessly toward the channel. At the entrance, jagged as a beast's fangs, the Cobblecat rose and fell with the waves. Roro Uhoris stood at the bow, his heart hammering. He shouted into the dark fissure with a triumphant, excited bark, his voice warping and echoing off the rock walls. Hey, are you blind up there? It's me, Roro Uhoris. The Cobblecat. Open up. Open the gate. He paused, the voice dropping into a hoarse, mock-grieving rasp. Bloody hell, this run got nasty. We ran into a pack of tough ones, lost a lot of brothers, the Cobblecat's nearly in pieces. Then his tone leapt up, fizzing with delight. But damn, it paid off. Fat haul, spices, silk, and dozens of crates of Westerosi golden dragons. He slammed the hull with a heavy hand, the sound dull and hollow, then turned to the shadows and mimed an exaggerated crate lifting motion. And we even scooped up a stray fat sheep. A Lysine spice ship hit the reef. Crew's scared stiff. The ship's going down, but the cargo's intact, right behind me. He pointed at the vague silhouette of a ship in the darkness. Open the gate, let us in. The lads are bleeding out, the hull won't hold much longer. The seas are rough, delay any longer and the ship sinks, the gold feeds the fish. Move. Shares for anyone who shows up. The Tyroshi sailors on board answered with tired, excited whoops, waving the leaf flag they'd hoisted. Atop the narrow rocky ledge above the channel entrance, the horn blasts and shouting roused a handful of pirate sentries. A scarred man with a leader's bearing squinted into the faint reflections and torchlight, studying the scene below. That's Roro's voice, no doubt, one guard muttered. It's the Cobblecat, but, the scarred man's gaze sharpened, hawkish. He pointed to the terrible gashes along the Cobblecat's hull near the waterline. Those wounds don't sit right. They look like ram marks. How could a merchant ship cause that? And the ship behind is too quiet. Wait, look at the waterline, these ships are sitting awfully deep. Either they're packed with cargo, or with people. Suspicion flared. The scarred man snapped at a subordinate. Quick, run and tell the boss. Say Roro's back with a fat sheep, but the Cobblecat's oddly wrecked and sits too deep. Let him decide. The subordinate scrambled toward the passage cut into the rock. The scarred man leaned out and shouted down, Roro. The boss'll be here soon. Hold steady, rough seas. He was buying time. Deep inside Torturer's Deep, in the huge sea-eroded cavern they called the Hall, Crabclaw had just been roused and was angrily gulping cheap liquor. The scarred man's breathless runner burst in. Boss. Roro's back with a fat sheep, but, the Cobblecat's badly damaged, like she's been rammed. And there could be a lot of people hidden inside, it might be a trap. Crabclaw's drunken haze vanished, a savage light ignited in his eyes. He sprang up, the tattoos on his shaved head seeming to pulse. That brat Roro, thinking to double-cross me. A cruel grin split his face. Fine. Let's see what tricks he's got. Order the chains lowered, let them in. Position every archer in the caves and on the walkways high above the channel, he barked. When they're all inside, wait for my signal, then shoot them to pieces. Not a one left alive. I want to see which fool dares scheme against Torturer's Deep. Chapter 37. Caught in a trap. The heavy winch groaned as the iron chain slowly lifted. The gate opened, but what yawned before them was a death maw lined with jagged fangs. Under Roro's near-panicked, suffocating commands, the Cobblecat and the other rowboats were the first to push into the narrow, stifling black fissure. The disguised, merchant ships, pressed in behind them. The towering, pitch-dark cliffs on either side seemed ready to close at any moment and crush them flat. Light all but vanished, leaving only the faint flicker of torches at the bows, their glow dancing across jagged, slick stone walls and the black waters below. The current surged with treacherous force, making it nearly impossible to steer in the confined channel. As the cobblecat struggled past the narrowest point of the passage, nearly a right-angled turn. Loose. Crab claws' shrill, owl-like scream split the darkness from a cavern high above. The cry ricocheted wildly through the gorge. In the next heartbeat. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A storm of arrows rained down like a swarm of venomous locusts, pouring from cracks, holes, and hanging wooden walkways carved into the cliffs. They fell in sheets upon the fleet packed tightly in the waterway. Quen's heart sank. A trap. Shields up. He roared. But before the words had left his mouth, the downpour struck. Arrows slammed into decks with rapid, heavy thuds, mingling with the startled cries and choking screams of dragon soul guards caught unprepared. The narrow waterway filled with the sound of chaos. In that desperate instant, a cold light flashed in Quen's eyes. A piercing, dragon-like cry of steel split the air as the Valyrian steel sword at his waist leapt free of its scabbard. Magic surged through the blade. The intricate Valyrian runes etched across its surface blazed to life, and crimson fire burst forth as if alive. The searing wave of heat drove back the darkness and chill in a breath. With a flick of his wrist, the flaming sword carved a blazing red arc. Clang, clang, clang. Arrows shattered on contact with the fiery edge, their heads melting away in the heat, shafts blackening and snapping to ash before falling uselessly to the deck. The sudden flare of fire and the rolling heat warped the storm of arrows, sending their aim wildly astray. Dragon soul guards, form up. Shields and counterattack. Quen's roar cracked through the din like thunder. The flaming longsword in his grasp blazed like a beacon in the suffocating dark. He swung in a wide arc, unleashing searing fire like a roaring dragon, hurling it toward the rock wall where the arrows came thickest. Boom! The flaming arc struck, detonating in a blinding cloud of fire. Pirate archers hidden behind the wall were blasted into the air, set ablaze and flung screaming into the black waters below like burning meteors. Dry moss and kindling clinging to the cliff face ignited instantly, spilling light across more of the concealed ambushers. Cutting down pirates as he moved, Quen's eyes searched the shadowed gorge for the figure giving the orders. Frustration gnawed at him. Since leaving the ruins of Valyria, his magic had crawled forward like a snail, barely a trickle of power gained with each passing day. The pressure of dwindling magic weighed heavily on him, each use leaving less in reserve. Whether the ghost grass he had brought from the ruins of Valyria could even be cultivated was still uncertain. He suspected that before the Red Comet appeared, the world's magic had been at a low ebb, and the dense magic within the Valyria ruins was nothing more than the lingering aftermath of blood sorcery gone out of control. Unless he returned to those perilous ruins, he had no choice but to ration his magic carefully. That was why, for this raid, he had resolved not to use the ultimate skill of dragon transformation. Instead, he meant to rely on the dragon soul guards to win a clean, decisive victory. Yet to his humiliation, the ambush he had so carefully laid had been uncovered by these pirates he hadn't even deemed worth considering. Almost at the same moment Quen unleashed his fiery sword aura, a silver figure on the deck below let out a clear, ringing cry of steel. It was Yelena. The slender, rippling Valyrian steel blade in her hand burst from its sheath, blazing with silent crimson fire. Dragon soul guards, follow me ashore and wipe out the ambushers. Her voice cut through the chaos. Ignoring the arrows flying toward her, she spun the flaming sword before her, weaving an unbroken wall of light. Clang, clang, clang. Seizing the opening, Yelena led the dragon soul guards in a leap onto the fjord's wooden walkways. The plank road was crowded with pirates feverishly loosing arrows, only to freeze in shock at the sight of this female reaper springing from the darkness below. Die. Yelena didn't waste motion on sweeping strikes. Her blade flashed with pinpoint thrusts and cuts, each precise and deadly. Whether it struck rough leather armor, flesh and bone, or wooden bow arms, everything her sword touched was either sliced clean apart by its sharpness or scorched black by fire. Each step left behind silver flame afterimages and corpses collapsing in her wake. In an instant, she had carved a swath of death through the walkway. Her ferocity became a signal. More dragon soul guards began climbing upward, using grappling hooks and the rock's natural ledges. Arrow fire had thinned, and they pressed the assault without hesitation, following the breach Yelena had opened. Screams and splashes echoed without pause, impossible to tell whether they belonged to pirate or guard. Found you. Lo Quen's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the cliffs until they locked onto a towering, bald figure standing out on a rocky ledge, torch in hand, bellowing orders, crab claw. The red crab tattoo gleamed clearly across his scalp in the firelight. Lo Quen didn't hesitate. He reversed his grip and slid the flaming sword back into its scabbard. The fire winked out at once. From his pack, he drew the massive dragonbone longbow he had claimed from the ruins of Valyria. Its body was a subdued gray-white, etched with dense runes and swirling sigils. As he poured magic into it, the carvings flared crimson, glowing like molten rock. The bowstring, braided from some impossibly strong sinew, thrummed with power. He set a black arrow, its head gleaming with a cold, sinister light, against the string. Drawing a deep breath, Lo Quen channeled magic into his arms and pulled. The dragonbone bow bent into a near-perfect crescent, groaning with a deep, commanding hum. At that moment, hum. The arrowhead flared, not with ghostly light, but with a sudden, burning flame. It burned silently, radiating such heat that the air around it warped and twisted. The bow reached full draw, its swirling sigils shining brighter, almost alive. Thrum. The bowstring snapped forward. The blazing arrow shot out like a meteor, ripping through the darkness. Trailing a long, fiery tail, it ignored the storm of arrows and streaked straight for Crabclaw's gaping mouth. He was still roaring in fury at the chaos below and Jelina's slaughter when a surge of killing intent seized him. He spun his head, a cold sweat breaking across his scalp. From the shadows, a flaming meteor arrow streaked toward him with lightning speed. He tried to dodge, but for a heartbeat his body froze. All he could do was watch as the fiery light filled his vision, swelling larger and larger. Boom. Not the whistling pierce of an arrow, but a violent detonation. The flaming shaft struck with perfect precision, burying itself in Crabclaw's open maw. The kinetic force and searing fire exploded in an instant. His head became a furnace. His mouth, nose, and even eye sockets burst outward under the heat and shockwave. No shards of bone or brain matter, only torrents of fire mixed with blackened, carbonized gore erupted from all 7 orifices. In less than a tenth of a second, most of his skull had been incinerated from the inside out. Still burning, the arrow carried Crabclaw's headless, charred bulk backward with brutal force. With a thunderous crash, his corpse slammed into the cliff face. The arrow drove deep into the rock, holding the body pinned, flames still dancing along its shaft. The whole of Torturer's Deep fell into dead silence. Every pirate who witnessed it was struck dumb with terror. Their leader, his head burned away by a single arrow. Crabclaw is dead. Surrender, and you'll be spared. Lo Quen's voice, cold as steel, carried on the echoes of the dragonbone bow, crushing the hearts of every surviving pirate. Their will shattered. Cries, kneeling, the clatter of discarded weapons, battle gave way to surrender. With no resistance left, the Dragon Soul Guards climbed and cleared the remaining walkways. The burning abyss cast its glow over Lo Quen's figure as he lowered his bow, the gray-white sheen of dragonbone shimmering in the firelight. Torturer's Deep had changed hands. Chapter 38. After the battle. After the battle, Jelina led the Dragon Soul Guards to secure Torturer's Deep, wiping out the last of the pirates who had refused to surrender. Lo Quen sent a ship back through the rift to summon Janice and bring the rest of the fleet inside. When Janice arrived, she and Jelina immediately joined forces to take full control of every part of Torturer's Deep. By the time dawn began to break, the 2 women approached, looking weary but composed. Lord, what should we do with this man? Jelina asked. Roro Uhoris was shoved forward by 2 Dragon Soul Guards and forced to his knees on the cold stone. Tear-streaked, he sobbed, Lord, I swear I never betrayed you. I knew nothing of Crabclaw's ambush. My life is in your hands, how could I ever dare? As the guide during last night's deadly trap, suspicion had naturally fallen on Roro. Jelina had ordered him seized as soon as the fighting ended. That's enough, Roro. Lo Quen's calm voice cut him short. Stand. This truly had nothing to do with you. He gestured for the guards to release him. In the chaos of the night before, Lo Quen had seen it clearly. Several of Crabclaw's arrows had skimmed Roro's scalp, nearly pinning him to the deck. As the restraints fell away, Roro nearly collapsed, then scrambled upright again. He bowed over and over, tears running freely. The gods will praise your mercy, Lord. Lo Quen turned to Jelina. Our casualties. A shadow crossed her cold features as she answered gravely, 156 Dragon Soul Guards fell. Most were caught in the first volley of arrows from both sides as we entered the channel, killed outright or wounded and swept into the sea. Fortunately, Janice and I have already resurrected them. Each time a dragon soul guard died, they had to be raised anew with magic, which consumed no small amount of strength. Though Jelena and Janice were now flame knights and wielded magic of their own, their power was still limited. Quen took their hands in his. A warm, steady surge of magic flowed into them through his touch, restoring some of what they had spent. Thank you, Lord, Jelena murmured softly. She glanced back at the line of ghostly pirates standing behind her. We also used the corpses of 100 pirates each to replenish the dragon soul guards. With Quen's dragonblood purity now at 22%, his soul bond with the two flame knights had deepened, allowing him to sustain and convert even more dragon soul guards. Jelena's limit had risen to 400, while Janice's had reached 600. Quen looked past her at the blood-stained corpses of pirates that now stood in perfect formation, lifeless eyes staring forward. He nodded. Have them armed with the weapons and armor we brought back from Valyria. They had hauled back vast stores from the ruins. Beyond the 800 dragon soul guards already equipped, over 1,000 more sets of weapons and armor remained. Nearby, Roro gaped in shock at the sight of dead pirates walking again. His gaze drifted to Quen's foreign features, recalling the blazing swords he and Jelena had wielded the night before, and that single flaming arrow. The thought struck him like a hammer. Quen could only be a sorcerer from far beyond the seas. Awe surged within him. At that moment, a weary-looking woman with long brown hair came rushing from a wide sea-carved cave below, clutching a baby swaddled in rough cloth. Her eyes went wide with relief as she spotted Roro freed. Willa, my Willa! Roro cried, hurrying to her. He wrapped her and the child in a desperate embrace, his voice breaking. Thank the gods, you're safe. He carefully took the bundle from her arms, staring at the wrinkled little face within. A foolish, blissful smile spread across his face, the smile of a man who had survived disaster. My sweet one, Daddy's back. Willa clung to his arm, still trembling. Roro, what happened out there? The ground shook, there were screams and fire everywhere. We hid in the deepest cave, too terrified to sleep a moment all night. Roro quickly whispered an explanation. When she heard that Crabclaw had been slain, joy broke across her face in a rush of relief. They had lived as hostages in Torturer's Deep, forever in fear, while Roro was forced to plunder in Crabclaw's name. That nightmare was finally over. Is this your wife? Quen's gaze fell on Willa. Only then did Willa notice the imposing figure beside her. She hurriedly bent her knees, holding the child close as she offered a respectful curtsy. Quen gave a slight nod, his eyes shifting to the infant in her arms, busy sucking on its tiny fingers. What is the child's name? Roro scratched his chestnut hair with a sheepish grin. Lord, Roro Uhoris. Quen couldn't help but laugh, 3 generations all bearing the same name. Startled by that soft chuckle, little Roro screwed up his face and suddenly let out a loud wail. His piercing cry shattered the solemn stillness of the cliffside platform. Roro and Willa panicked, fumbling to rock and pat the child in a clumsy attempt to soothe him, the scene descending briefly into chaos. Once the cries finally died down, Quen turned to Roro, who let out a long breath of relief. Roro. Lord. Roro straightened at once, his face solemn. He now regarded Quen as a mighty sorcerer, not someone he would ever again dare to take lightly. Will you swear loyalty to me, Quen, and serve under my command? Quen asked. Roro froze. He could not forget how, just the night before, this man had burned Crabclaw's head to ash with a single arrow. He could not forget the Dragon Soul Guards, silent as iron and fearless in death. Nor could he forget Jelena, her flaming sword cutting through the rock face like a goddess of war. Most of all, he could not forget that they could raise dead pirates into tireless soldiers. To follow such strength was a chance Roro Uhoris had never dared dream of. He drew a deep breath and dropped to one knee. I, Roro Uhoris of Tirosh, swear by the gods themselves that from this day forth, I pledge my loyalty to Quen. Though Tiroshi culture knew no knightly vows, they had simple words for oaths of fealty. When he rose again, Quen turned to Jelena. How many pirates have surrendered? In total, more than 1,800, she replied. Quen looked back to Roro. You once commanded more than 100 men. From those who surrendered at Torturer's Deep, choose another 300. That will give you 500, and from now on, they will be under your direct command. Under my direct command. Roro's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with disbelief, his voice trembling with excitement. Truly, Lord. Of course. Quen's tone was firm. You know the waters, the reefs, and the islands of the Stepstones better than anyone. If we are to take root in these seas, we will need your knowledge. These 500 will be your men. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Roro. Do your duty well. Lord, Roro will keep his oath. Roro was so moved he nearly dropped to his knees again, but Quen raised a hand to stop him. With these urgent matters settled, Quen ordered the sisters to move the supplies from the ships into Torturer's deep storehouses. Only then did he take Roro with him to properly survey the pirate stronghold he had just claimed. Chapter 39. The situation in the Stepstones. They climbed the oak walkways clinging to the cliffs and reached the summit of Torturer's Deep. From the height, Quen looked down over the natural marvel below. The entrance was a narrow, twisting fissure, hundreds of feet tall, just wide enough for a single ship to squeeze through. On either side rose steep, slick black cliffs, riddled with cracks and holes. To the left lay a near right-angled, treacherous bend in the fjord. Once past it, the view opened suddenly wide. Beneath the sheer cliffs stretched a vast, fan-shaped natural harbor, as though a giant hammer had smashed out a hollow in the rock. The water was broad and calm. Ships were tied with ropes to crude wooden docks or simply anchored in the bay. Among them were 3 of Crab Claw's larger warships and more than a dozen rowboats. Yet even with nearly 20 vessels inside, the harbor's surface seemed scarcely touched. At a glance, it could hold 100 ships with ease. This is a natural haven, Quen remarked in awe. You're right, Lord, Roro said proudly, pointing out across the bay. Not only is the harbor natural, but the cliffs around it are honeycombed with sea caves. People live in them, and they're used to store grain and weapons. The two walked along the cliff above the caves, then followed another walkway back down toward the base. The shoreline wasn't sandy beach but a vast platform carved by the sea at the cliff's base, lined with sea caves of all sizes. These were the pirates' dens, dwellings, warehouses, prisons, even crude forges. At their mouths lay piles of clutter, nets, and ship repair tools. The stone walls were blackened with soot. Last night's battle had spared the cliffside walkways and some of the wooden sheds. The main cavern halls cut into the rock remained largely intact. Outside, shadows moved busily. Pirates who had surrendered worked under the cold stares of dragon soul guards, clearing away the wreckage of battle. The roar of waves striking the cliffs reverberated through the abyss, magnified by the cavernous walls until it became a constant thunder. Quen and Roro entered Crab Claw's core stronghold, the great sea-carved cavern that served as his hall. At once, the sharp tang of brine filled their nostrils. The space was immense, so vast that even their footsteps echoed sharply against the stone floor. Torches burned all along the walls, casting light into every jagged recess until the cavern shone almost like day. The floor was uneven, scarred with deep diagonal grooves, as though some massive blunt tool had ground across it again and again. Above, stalactites of every shape hung from the towering dome, cold droplets gathering and falling with a steady drip that echoed through the cavern. But the most striking feature was the massive map carved directly into the stone wall. Its lines were bold yet precise, covering a wide span of rock. Scattered across it were countless shapes, large and small. Roro Uhoris bowed slightly. Lord, that is the stepstones and the surrounding seas. Every island, reef, and sandbar is marked. Important points are marked with charred wood or colored shells. It took Crab Claw more than 10 years to complete it. Quen's eyes scanned the stone-carved map. Where are we now? Here, Lord. Roro stepped forward quickly and pointed to the southeast corner. There, a shape ringed with dense short lines had been carved, beside it a crude skull symbol. This is Torturer's Deep. See. It's ringed by natural reefs like a moat, nearly impossible for large warships to approach. Roro traced a circle around it, then pointed toward several larger shapes. The surrounding major islands are quite far from us. But here. His finger shifted to the eastern edge of the map, near the southwest jut of Essos. That's close to the disputed lands. But Quen's attention had already drifted north and west. There, 2 shapes loomed, many times larger than the others, like colossal twin gates. And these 2. Those are Bloodstone Isle and Grey Gallows Isle, Roro said, his voice carrying a trace of awe. They're the 2 largest islands in the Stepstones, one to the north and one to the south, like a pair of fangs guarding the throat between Dorne and the Stepstones. Almost every ship trying to reach the Narrow Sea or the Summer Sea from the Dornish coast has to pass right under their watch. Catching something in Quen's intent gaze, he hesitated, then added, but Lord, that's the domain of the Prince of the Narrow Sea, Saladhor San. His fleet has more than 20 triple-banked war galleys, far larger than our rowing boats, plus countless merchantmen, cogs, whalers, and swift longboats. His power in those waters is nothing short of terrifying. Salladhor San. The name was not unfamiliar to Quen. A pirate lord from Lee, he had once backed Stannis during the War of the Five Kings. But when Stannis marched north to the wall and the promised gold never came, Salladhor lost faith. On one mission, while ferrying Davos the Onion Knight to White Harbor, he abandoned him and returned to the Stepstones to resume his trade in piracy. Yes, Lord. He comes from House San of Lee. For centuries, that family has lived by piracy and smuggling. Their power is vast, everyone in the Stepstones knows them. Roro's tone dripped with caution and unease when speaking of that sea lord. Quen gave a slight nod, his fingers idly tapping the cold stone map. Tell me then, aside from this so-called prince, what other powers here are worth naming? Roro obeyed without hesitation, pointing to marks on the map as though reciting from memory. He indicated an island in the center, shaped like a shattered jaw. This is Jawbreak Island. It's ruled by a mad pirate chief called Shipbreaker, Kago. He's a lunatic, followed only by outlaws. His favorite tactic is to ram merchant ships with his iron prow, sink them, then scavenge the wrecks, hence his name. His base is Jawbreak Island Cave, a natural sea cavern. Easy to defend, hard to storm. He moved his hand to a cluster of dense dots on the central part of the map. This is Weeping Reef. That belongs to Salt Widow, Marla. A ruthless woman, her husband and brothers all died at sea, but she clawed together a following through sheer will. She's a master of ambushes, using the treacherous currents and reefs around Weeping Reef to strike. Few ships marked by her ever escape. Finally, Roro pointed toward the northern part of the chart, at an island shaped like a broken spear. This is Broken Spear Isle. It holds the black market village of Spear Handle. Officially, it's a free port run by merchants for smugglers, but everyone knows Tyrosh is behind it, one of the 9 free cities. It's the Stepstone's largest den for fencing loot and resupply. Weapons, slaves, spices, contraband, with enough coin, anything can be bought there. Its defenses are strong. Rumor says Tyroshi regular troops are stationed there, disguised as sellswords. Quen rubbed his chin, his gaze sweeping across the marked powers carved into the map. His thoughts raced, already weighing how best to break through this fractured and chaotic sea, to gather this tangled pirate web into his own grasp. Roro, mistaking his silence for concern that other factions might covet Torturer's deep, quickly sought to reassure him. Lord, you needn't worry. The Stepstones have always been like this, today I take from you, tomorrow you kill me. Nests change hands constantly. He tapped the reefs marked on the map. Torturer's deep is strong and remote. Unless someone has a blood feud or stands to gain a fortune, no one will bother coming all this way to gnaw at a hard bone. Their true focus will always be raiding the merchant ships passing through. That's where the steady flow of gold lies. Quen smiled faintly and shook his head. His gaze burned into Roro, and that smile made Roro's chest tighten with unease. It isn't them attacking me that I fear, Quen said. His finger drew a wide circle across the map, encircling Bloodstone, Grey Gallows, Jawbreak, Weeping Reef, Broken Spear Isle, and beyond. What I'm thinking is which one to strike first, until all of them are gone. Chapter 40. The Costly Fleet. Roro Uhori's chestnut eyes widened in shock as he stared at Quen in disbelief. The master he served intended to swallow the entire Stepstones whole. Suppressing the storm in his chest, he cautiously advised, Lord, the Stepstones are a chain of islands. To fight the pirates who have entrenched themselves there for years, we need more than just sailing ships. Those may serve well on long ocean voyages, but they're far too clumsy for fleet battles. Naval warfare demands oared ships. He counted on his fingers. We currently command nearly 20 oared vessels, but only 3 large ships, taken from Crab Claw, can truly be called warships, sturdy enough to withstand ramming. Roro's voice was heavy with worry. Quen already knew this well. In this world, ships fell into 2 main types. The first were sailing ships, powered primarily by wind, flat-bottomed ships, galleons, swan ships. These were excellent for ocean voyages and trade, capable of carrying large amounts of cargo. The second were oared ships, powered by rowers, better suited for coastal combat. The strength of such ships depended largely on the number of oars. Most had only a single bank of oars, but double-banked ships could serve as the backbone of any fleet. The most formidable were triple-banked galleys, massive yet astonishingly agile, able to maneuver through the seas with ease. Salladhor San's flagship, the Valyrian, was one such triple-banked behemoth, with no fewer than 300 oars. These oared ships still carried sails, though in coastal combat the crew would haul them down, relying entirely on the oarsmen. If the winds turned favorable, the sails would be lowered, combining mast and oars for even greater speed. The larger the ship, the more soldiers it could carry and the more scorpions and catapults it could mount. Naturally, the cost rose just as steeply. How many gold dragons would it take to build a fleet to rival Salador's? Quen asked. At the words, build a fleet, Roro reacted like a cat with its tail stepped on, clutching his head with a cry. Gods above. Lord, do you know what the Prince of the Narrow Seas fleet of over 20 warships is worth? The hulls alone cost no less than 1,000,000 gold dragons. The number struck Quen like a hammer blow to the chest. The merchant ships he had bought in Volantis were worth a mere fraction by comparison. Why so expensive? He pressed, brow furrowed. Roro drew a deep breath, ticking off each point on his rough fingers. First, the materials. A warship is no merchant vessel. The keel and ribs must be made from the toughest, most resilient hardwoods, strong enough to endure collisions yet not so heavy as to sink the craft. Such timber costs a fortune. Second, the weapons. A hull alone is just an empty shell. Heavy scorpions and counterweight catapults must be forged of fine iron, and those don't come cheap. Third, the upkeep. A warship isn't some ornament. Once afloat, it becomes a gold-devouring beast. Each month, maintenance includes inspecting the hull, replacing ropes, applying tar, paying sailors, feeding oarsmen, at least several hundred, often nearly 1,000 gold dragons. And that's not even counting the repairs after battle. Quen did the sums in his head and drew in a sharp breath. So you're saying Salador's fleet consumes more than 20,000 gold dragons every month? At least. Roro swore. And those massive triple-banked giants cost even more. Only then did Quen truly grasp what a bottomless pit of coin it took to keep a fleet strong. His thoughts turned to the Iron Throne's royal fleet of 200 ships, and to Lord Redwin's equally vast fleet from the Arbor. Without the taxes of the Seven Kingdoms, or a monopoly on the wine trade along the Golden Routes, who else could afford such a thing? Wealth was the foundation of rule at sea. He considered his own fortune. The treasure he had carried from the ruins of Valyria, even after deducting what he had spent in Volantis, came to a little over 400,000 gold dragons. Enough to raise a strong medium castle in Westeros and command respect in its region. But for building a fleet, it was a paltry sum. The pitiful hoard plundered from Torturer's Deep amounted to less than 100,000, no more than a drop in the ocean. No money. Seizing is better than toiling. The old ways of the Ironborn flashed through Quen's mind. Roro, Quen quickly gathered his thoughts and gave a decisive order. Withdraw funds from the treasury and repair every ship that can still sail. Make sure they're ready for battle at any time. Also, though our Swan is only a sailing vessel, arm her as well. Mount heavy scorpion crossbows and catapults along her sides. You know where to buy the materials. Spear Handle Village, Roro replied at once. It's the largest black market in the Stepstones. With enough gold dragons, there's no weapon or timber you can't find there. After Roro departed, Quen summoned the sisters, Jelena and Janice. The damp, sea-carved cave was crude and primitive, yet it had finally become their first foothold in the Stepstones. Compared to drifting endlessly at sea, this was far more secure. Ever since Quen had taken the sisters as flame knights, he had revealed the secrets of magic and ghost grass to them. Now he had called them to discuss the matter further. Janice, do the Valyrian texts record any methods for cultivating ghost grass? Janice shook her head slightly, her fine brows knitting. Since leaving Valyria, I've searched whenever I wasn't training, but I found nothing. There are no mentions of ghost grass at all. It was as if it appeared out of thin air after the doom. Quen mused aloud. The blood mage once had you gather ghost grass outside Tyria. That means he knew something of its properties. Perhaps you can search his old manuscripts or notes. Or even try planting some in the soil to see what happens. Janice nodded in thought. I'll look for any manuscripts, and I'll test planting some. Jelena's cool voice broke in then, carrying a faint, uncharacteristic urgency. Must we really wait years for magic to return? Quen had already told them his conjectures about the Red Comet and the tide of magic. He nodded slowly, his gaze deep. It's only my own rough theory, that when the stars bleed, magic will revive. I can't say whether it will come to pass. But for now, with no source to replenish our magic, it's best not to use it recklessly. Jelena, your reserves are already low. In last night's fight with those pirates, you didn't need to awaken the magic within your Valyrian steel blade. I understand, Jelena replied, her fingers unconsciously brushing the hilt at her waist. At present, only Quen and Jelena possessed weapons and armor inscribed with runes. Quen's reserves far outstripped hers. As long as he didn't use dragon transformation magic, he still had enough to draw on. Softly, Janice added, "We brought nearly 1,000 bundles of ghost grass from Tyria. Not all of it has to be used as seed. It can also serve to replenish our magic." Quen fell silent. He knew well that ghost grass could restore magic, but he had another purpose in mind. "Do you remember the 9 dragon egg fossils?" Janice's violet eyes lit up at once, sparks of excitement flashing within them. "You can hatch them." A flicker of emotion stirred in Jelena's eyes as well. "To be precise, awaken them," Quen explained. "I can infuse magic into the stones to awaken the dragons within. They won't hatch right away. Instead, they'll grow and develop inside the eggs until they are ready to break free. But this requires an immense amount of magic." He glanced at the system panel. Awakening a single dragon egg fossil demanded 70,000 units of magic. With his Dragonbond lineage, he could awaken 4. The choice before him was clear: expend vast amounts of ghost grass to awaken the fossils now, or wait until he found a stable source of magic. 4 fossils would require 280,000 units, roughly 900 bundles of ghost grass, nearly all of their stores. He hesitated only briefly before deciding. Some of the dragon egg fossils had to be awakened. Jorah Mormont's slave trading scandal broke in 293 AC. He had since fled Westeros, stayed in Braavos for a time, and then gone on to Lee. That meant the current year was at least 293 AC, likely 294 AC. The main events were drawing close. He had to hatch dragons as soon as possible. Seeing the anticipation flickering in the sister's eyes, a firm smile tugged at Quen's lips. "Go on. Choose the eggs you desire. In a few days, right here, we will awaken the sleeping dragons." Chapter 41. Threatening Jorah. The decision made, Quen walked straight into the sea-eroded cavern prison deep within Torturer's Deep. The damp, chilly air reeked of mildew and salt, while torchlight flickered against the stone walls, casting restless shadows. Several days had passed since Jorah Mormont's capture. Though Quen had seemingly subdued more than 1,000 pirates in last night's fierce battle, few were truly fit for use. Roro commanded 500 pirates. Janice and Jelena held 1,000 elite dragon soul guards and another 1,500 newly attached pirates. But Janice had thrown herself entirely into solving the problem of cultivating ghost grass, leaving almost the full weight of command on Jelena's shoulders. According to Jelena, those pirates were weak in combat, utterly unfit for hard battles. Facing the tangled chaos of the stepstones and the threat of powerful enemies, he urgently needed a master at arms, someone who could forge a rabble into an army of steel. The only candidate was the man behind these iron bars, Jorah Mormont. As Lord of Bear Island, Jorah Mormont had fought with distinction in the Battle of the Trident and the campaign to put down the Iron Islands rebellion. His combat record was illustrious, especially at the taking of Pike, where he was the second man to scale the walls after Thoros of Myr. His battlefield experience was beyond question. Behind the bars, the wavering firelight outlined a slumped, solitary figure, like a giant bear stripped of its claws and trapped in a cage. "Esser Jorah," Quen's voice rang out clearly in the confined space, even in detached. "After these days of rest, have your spirits recovered?" Jorah Mormont jerked his head up, his clouded eyes burning with rage and humiliation. "Who are you? An eastern face, yet you know the nobles of the 7 kingdoms so well, and what have you done with my Linus?" His voice was hoarse, thick with anxious desperation. Quen gave a low chuckle, tinged with mockery. "Patience, Lord Mormont." He lingered on the title, his tone dripping with scorn. "Lady Mormont is enjoying our hospitality. Trust me, I hold the noble bloodlines of the 7 kingdoms in great respect. Except for the Lannisters," he added coldly to himself. That Lord cut Jorah like a whip. His face darkened with fury, veins swelling at his temples. "Boy, if you so much as touch a single hair on Linus's head, I swear." "Of course not," Quen interrupted smoothly, his voice heavy with false sincerity. "The sanctity of a guest's rights is something I hold sacred. If Lady Linus were to come to the slightest harm, it would be worse than death to me. However." His gaze swept over the dank, mold-stinking cavern prison. "This is a pirate's lair in the stepstones. It lacks the luxuries that could bring a smile to your lady's face. For now, she must endure a little hardship. Surely, Esser, you above all can understand my difficult position." His words dripped with venom, every syllable barbed. Jorah's heart sank, bitterness rising in his throat like bile. He could not mistake Lo Quen's hidden meaning. These days in the dungeon had forced him to confront himself more clearly. Linus's vanity, and his own blind indulgence of it, were the root of all his misery. To give her Aldtown's luxuries on the harsh, barren Bear Island, he had drained its meager coffers, bled his people dry, and in the end turned to the desperate shame of slave trading. He shut his eyes in anguish, forcing his turmoil down before meeting Lo Quen's gaze once more. Only then did he fully notice how young his captor was, and the depth in him that seemed far older than his years. The sword at your waist. Jorah's eyes fixed on Lo Quen's weapon, his warrior's instinct sharpening. Is that Valyrian steel? Clang! The blade rang out like a dragon's cry as it slid free of the sheath. A chill, cutting light flooded the cell, the rippling patterns along the steel gleaming with an otherworldly glow beneath the torchlight. Jorah's breath caught. How do you have a Valyrian steel sword of such quality? His brow furrowed tight, the young man before him seeming ever more unfathomable. Do you think this sword is impressive? Lo Quen's lips curved in a faint, unreadable smile. What if I told you, the soldiers who fought the pirates that day, their red copper armor and the blades in their hands, were all forged from Valyrian steel? Jorah's pupils shrank. He remembered the sea battle vividly. Those silent warriors, clad in armor of uncanny sheen and strength, wielding blades sharper than any steel he had known. Instinctively, he rejected the notion. Impossible. There cannot be so much Valyrian steel in the world, unless you plundered the ruins of Valyria itself. He did not realize he had stumbled upon the truth. Sir Jorah, Lo Quen suddenly shifted the subject, his voice carrying a strange weight. Have you ever experienced a true upheaval in your life? I don't mean the exposure of your slave trading, or this imprisonment. I mean waking to find yourself in an utterly unfamiliar world, ruled by entirely different laws. Jorah froze, then shook his head blankly. Then your fate was nothing more than chance. Lo Quen's smile deepened, his words heavy with meaning. This world is far beyond your imagination. He spoke as if declaring a universal truth. But what does this have to do with Valyrian steel? Jorah pressed, voice urgent. No more idle talk. With a flick of his wrist, Lo Quen slid the sword back into its sheath. The motion was clean, cutting off Jorah's words. Now for business, Esser. As a prisoner, you must already suspect. Why did I capture you? Why spare your life? Jorah was silent for a moment, then said in a low, firm voice, ransom. That's all. A pirate's trade, nothing more. Lo Quen nearly laughed, but only shook his head. Wrong. Bear Island, beyond its black bears and frozen soil, what could I possibly want? What I desire. His gaze locked with Jorah's, each word deliberate, is your service. Jorah's face twisted with outrage, as though struck. He spat his scorn. You expect a knight, anointed with the holy oils of the seven, to serve some foreigner of no standing. If I ever betrayed my vows so far, I wouldn't need Eddard Stark's eyes to end me, my father himself would split me in two with Longclaw. Don't you want to hear what I would have you do? Lo Quen's tone remained calm. Whatever it is, I'd rather you kill me now. Jorah's answer was ironclad. The warmth vanished from Lo Quen's face, leaving only an icy mask. You should have said so sooner. Then I wouldn't have troubled myself to be so courteous to Lady Linus. You lay a finger on Linus and I will kill you. Jorah hurled himself at the bars like a maddened beast, eyes blazing red, fists clenched so tight his knuckles cracked. Lo Quen's lips twitched with amusement. He had known all along, Jorah's weakness was women. Tisk, tisk, tisk. He shook his head slowly, his voice mocking. Sir Jorah, your devotion to Lady Linus would move the gods themselves. So, shall we strike a bargain? He stepped closer, his voice low but unyielding as it carried through the bars. I give you my word, Lady Linus will be safe and comfortable here, so long as she remains obedient. In return, you will serve me as my sworn knight. I will pay you well, enough to maintain your lady in the dignity she deserves. After all. He paused deliberately, his gaze stabbing into Jorah's heart like an icicle. Surely you would not want your lady, the noble Lady Linus Hightower, to suffer even the slightest hardship in a pirate's den. Lo Quen's tone carried the form of an offer, but the weight of a threat. Jorah's face contorted with fury and humiliation, the veins at his temple throbbing. The words of refusal rose to his lips, only to choke in his throat, strangled by an unseen hand. Linus's tear-streaked face, her terror, and the horrors she might endure in this savage land, all surged in his mind. His glare burned into Quen, chest heaving as though straining against invisible chains. Only the crackling torch fire and his harsh breathing broke the silence of the cell. At last, as though all strength had drained from him, Jorah bowed his head. A sigh escaped, heavy as a boulder crashing down. So long as you can guarantee Linus's safety, I will serve you. Each word was dragged out through clenched teeth, thick with bitterness and shame. A wise choice. The smile of a man in absolute control spread across Quen's face as he gave a light clap. Rest easy, I am true to my word. So long, of course, as the other party does not break it first. Jorah caught the warning in every syllable. I need you to train an army for me, a real fighting force. Quen's tone grew sharp, all pretense set aside. You saw it yourself. My men took this stronghold and many prisoners. But how to forge these pirates into a blade fit for war, how to lead them in battle. That is what I need from you. Jorah's head snapped up, shock and suspicion flashing in his eyes. Train an army. For what? To seize the stepstones. These lands are barren, not worth ruling. Or is it? His gaze narrowed, piercing into Quen. Do you mean to follow the path of the Ninnepenny kings, use this place as a springboard to reach for Westeros, to chase a far greater ambition? His noble training had made him quick to grasp the implication. Quen shook his head, a curl of contempt tugging at his lips. The Ninnepenny kings. Nothing but a farce, a joke mocked by history. He said nothing more, turning toward the cell door. The dim torchlight stretched his retreating shadow long across the stone. What is it you truly want? Jorah's unwilling voice followed him into the dark. Quen did not break stride. Only one sentence lingered in the damp air. In time, you'll know. The heavy door swung shut, locking Jorah Mormont's face, scarred with humiliation, anger, and dread, once more into the flickering torchlight and the deep, consuming dark. Chapter 42. The Problem of Growing Ghost Grass. 10 days ago, Roro Uhoris departed Torturers Deep aboard an unremarkable medium-sized rowboat. Before leaving, Quen instructed him to spread word of Torturers Deep changing hands after purchasing repair materials. Roro forced a knowing smile. Understood, Lord. You want to lure those fish onto the hook. Quen nodded. With Torturers Deep newly seized, if any bold pirates dared to stir up trouble, it would play right into his hands. Watching the boat's silhouette fade into the sea mist, Quen turned and walked deeper into Torturers Deep. Over the past few days, Janis had practically scoured every accessible corner of Torturers Deep, sowing 7 or 8 batches of seeds. The results were always the same. The sprouts struggled to break through the surface, only for their leaves to quickly turn gray and lifeless, veins charring black before withering away completely. Instead of the strange, potent aura expected of a demonic plant, the air carried only a bitter taste. In the cold, damp storage cavern, Quen found Janis. By the faint glow of an oil lamp, she was poring over the heavy parchment notebooks of the Blood Mage, brought from Tyria. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the dim light, her brow tightly furrowed. Still no luck. Quen's voice echoed clearly in the cavern. Janis closed the notebook, her movements betraying a trace of exhaustion. Tried everywhere. The seeds will sprout, but they won't survive. Soil, light, humidity. I've adjusted everything I could. It's useless. She picked up the notebook again, her fingers tracing the obscure runes and diagrams. The Blood Mage's notes contain no cultivation methods, only records of gathering. She raised her eyes to him, violet irises dark in the shadows. I keep wondering, if the Blood Mage knew how to cultivate it, wouldn't he have had the Tyria people grow it long ago? Why risk sending people to scour the world? Quen leaned against a cold stone cabinet, his knuckles unconsciously tapping against the rough wood. He had considered the same. He paused. But he used ghost grass to make potions that suppressed your blood magic, curse. That knowledge had to come from somewhere. How else would he know? Perhaps the Blood Mage lied, Janis speculated. The potions weren't made from ghost grass at all. Ghost grass must serve another purpose. Quen sank into thought. That was possible. To conceal some darker secret, the Blood Mage may have explained his demand for ghost grass as potion making, when in truth, his purpose was something else. Then what was his real goal? A sudden thought struck Quen. The Blood Mage's need for so much ghost grass was likely tied to forbidden blood magic. He had created a chimera. He schemed to resurrect a dragon. Could those have required ghost grass? He claimed he intended to seize Quen's very body. Could such strange, unheard of magic demand ghost grass as well? The more he thought, the murkier it became. Ghost grass had to conceal a secret far greater than they realized. Quen shook his head, forcing the thoughts aside. Since our ghost grass cultivation plan has failed, we must prepare for the worst. If that's the case, the dragons are crucial. Dragons were not like men. As they grew, the magic within them only grew stronger. Quen had speculated before, but Janice had found the answer in the books from Tyria. Dragons grew by feeding. Through this feeding, they accelerated their absorption of external magic, causing their bodies to expand. If they managed to hatch a dragon, even in this low tide of magic, it would not suffer the sluggish growth that plagued Quen, whose magic crawled within him like a snail's pace. More importantly, with the Dragonblood pact binding the Flame Knights and Quen, they could ride the dragon once it hatched from his magic. When the dragon matured, both Jelena and Janice could become dragon riders. He led them to his bedroom deep within the sea-eroded caves. For safety, he kept the 9 fossilized dragon eggs in an ironwood box at his bedside. Lifting the heavy lid, he revealed in the dim light 9 massive stone eggs, each with its own distinct color and pattern. They lay quietly upon soft velvet, radiating an ancient and mysterious aura. Choose, Quen said. Which one do you wish to awaken? Janice's gaze wandered over the dragon eggs before finally resting on a pale purple one. Its shell bore delicate, nebula-like violet patterns. She reached out, her fingertips brushing lightly across the cold surface. I choose this one. A flicker of doubt crossed Quen's mind. A purple dragon. The vast genealogies of House Targaryen seemed to record no such color. Still, the dragon born of this egg would no doubt be beautiful. Jelena barely hesitated. Her eyes swept the eggs before fixing on a silvery white one. Its shell was smooth, its sheen cold as moonlit steel, carrying a sharp, cutting beauty. She lifted it with steady, deliberate hands. 2 more remained to be awakened. Quen's gaze was immediately drawn to the blood-red dragon egg. Unlike the others, it did not lie still. In the dim light, a crimson glow seemed to flow deep within its shell, radiating a primal and dangerous allure. Without pause, he reached for it. The egg felt icy cold to the touch, yet he could almost sense the violent power seething within. His gaze shifted to the remaining eggs in the box. At first, he meant to choose something unlike the blood-red egg, perhaps the bronze one, or the speckled sea blue. But after a moment's hesitation, his fingers closed instead around a darker, heavier egg, deep crimson shading into black. This egg was black as midnight, its shell not smooth but etched with swirling, dark red patterns. A heavy, oppressive force seemed to emanate from it, as though it could devour all light. Quen lifted it, thinking its color not unlike Drogon's. The 4 eggs were chosen and placed upon the table, pale purple, silver white, blood red, and black crimson. They lay quietly, waiting for the moment of awakening. Quen nodded. He was ready. Before this day, he had already moved all 900 bundles of precious ghost grass to a hidden cavern deep outside his chamber. Now he stepped out and began drawing on their immense magic. The ghost grass released its energy in a torrent, invisible yet irresistible, rushing into his body under the pull of his will. 40,000, 80,000, 120,000, 160,000, 200,000, 220,000. Magic filled every limb and bone until he reached his current limit, 220,000. Beyond his original 40,000, he had absorbed 180,000 in a single breath. But that limit allowed him to awaken only 3 dragon eggs. At once, Quen fixed upon Janice's and Jelena's eggs, along with the blood-red one he had chosen first. Dragon Bond lineage. Quen's eyes snapped open, molten gold flickering deep within his pupils. An invisible, ancient pressure surged outward, the weight of bloodline authority thickening the very air. At his brow, beneath the skin, a brilliant golden point flared like the core of a furnace. Then 3 drops of dragon blood, condensed to perfection, glowing with searing heat and primordial majesty, emerged from his brow. They hovered in the air like living stars. Each drop stretched into a fine golden stream, silent yet irresistible, and sank into the 3 fossilized eggs. The vast magic was drained in an instant, the fullness in his body ebbing away like the tide. Quen's face turned pale, the strain of overexertion flickering across his brow. But his eyes did not waver. He plunged once more into meditation, drawing out another torrent of ghost grass magic. This time he drew 100,000, 70,000 to awaken the egg, the rest to replenish his 40,000 reserve, filling the nearly dry wellspring within him. Finally, his gaze fell on the last of the 4, the black crimson egg, dark as a midnight wave frozen in time. Up to 50 chapters ahead for now. patreon.com/BlurryDream. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 43. Strengthening the defenses. The same process repeated. A golden radiance gathered at Quen's brow, and a drop of dragon blood, scorching and infused with the power of an ancient pact, seeped forth, merging silently into the dark dragon egg. The suffocating pressure in the chamber slowly lifted. The 4 dragon eggs, now infused with dragon blood, lay motionless. A faint, lustrous glow rippled across their shells, as though sleeping beasts had just drawn their first breath. Janice had held her breath throughout, her violet eyes fixed on the path of each drop of dragon blood. When the final trace of gold vanished into the black-crimson shell, she could not restrain herself. She hurried forward, bending low, her silver hair nearly brushing against the pale purple egg she had chosen. Her fingertips hovered above the cold surface, studying every line and texture, desperate to catch even the faintest sign of life within. Is it done? She whispered, expectation in her voice as she turned eagerly to Quen. Quen gave a slight nod, his gaze lingering on the 4 eggs. The silence of fossilized stone had been replaced by a vast, hidden vitality, like molten rock straining to burst free from beneath the shells. When will they hatch? Jelena stepped closer, her voice carrying an uncharacteristic urgency. As a descendant of House Valyrian, one of the Dragonlord bloodlines, the birth of dragons was both her yearning and her obsession. She could hardly wait to see them with her own eyes. Quen shook his head, brushing his fingertips across the gradually warming shells. Hard to say. Perhaps months. He could feel the slow but steady pulse beneath the stone. That long. Jelena murmured under her breath. Quen carefully placed the eggs on the heavy wooden table beneath the stone window. Outside, sheer cliffs plunged into the sea, where waves crashed endlessly against black rock. Cold moonlight streamed through the lattice, spilling over the 4 eggs, pale purple, silver white, blood red, and black crimson, each glowing faintly from within, like slumbering stars. From now on, the Dragon Soul Guards will secure this place. No one is to enter, Quen said firmly. Janice frowned. What if they hatch while we're gone? Quen thought for a moment. When I leave, I'll station the Dragon Soul Guards inside. If the eggs stir, they'll report to us immediately. The 3 agreed not to name the unborn dragons yet. They would wait until the shells broke. With that decided, they parted ways. As Quen stepped out of the sea cave, he heard the steady but awkward rhythm of drill commands from the harbor, interspersed with Jorah Mormont's harsh barking. The Knight of Bear Island spotted him, halted the training, and strode over from Fan Bay with heavy steps, his expression as stormy as a gray sky. Since the day he had sworn loyalty and been released, Jorah had gone straight to Linus. At first, he feared Quen might break his word, but when he saw her unharmed, his heart finally eased. Even so, her situation gnawed at him like a thorn. Born to nobility in the Reach, Linus had known only wealth and indulgence. Now she lived in a bare stone chamber, served by a single lowly slave. The splendor and dignity of her past life were gone, replaced by fear and despair. To her, every day in Torturer's Deep dragged like a year. She lived in constant dread that one of the pirate lords might take her by force. Her once radiant face was shadowed with sorrow, her spirit withered. The sight of her suffering pierced Jorah deeper than any wound to his flesh. To Linus, his arrival was her only lifeline. They exchanged what had befallen them during the past days. Jorah still remembered how, before he left, she had clung to him in tears, begging him to take her away from this den of pirates. But he knew well that Quen would never release her. She was the chain binding his loyalty. Still, for her sake, he played the dutiful husband. He swore to her that he would find a way to escape together soon. Yet even as he said the words, he knew how hollow they sounded. Seeing the restrained anger and bitterness etched across Jorah's face, a faint, cold glint passed through Quen's eyes. Sir Jorah, he asked, what do you make of the men's bearing? Quen had ordered Jorah to train the surrendered pirates in batches, but he had given him no authority to command them. That rankled Jorah, though there was nothing he could do. Even if he ordered the pirates to strike at Quen, they would stand no chance against the Dragon Soul Guards armed with Valyrian steel at Quen's side. Jorah's jaw clenched, his voice hard as stone. Abysmal. A pack of slippery thieves, their heads filled with nothing but plunder and tricks to run. No discipline. No grasp of formations. He paused, a trace of pride and resentment in his tone. I could bring down several myself. Exactly why? Quen replied evenly. I need you, Esser, to forge them into men who can actually draw blood with a blade. Jorah's throat worked. At last, he gave a heavy, reluctant nod, his weathered head bowing. I will. He turned toward the noisy harbor, his broad back like a bear's, yet burdened, weighed down with gloom. Quen watched him go, eyes narrowing slightly. He had never trusted Jorah, not for a moment. In truth, this man had always been self-absorbed and ruled by infatuation. First Linus, he squandered his house's wealth to win her favor, leaving his family and people to suffer the cost. Then Daenerys, he threw himself at her feet, endlessly swearing loyalty, scheming to drive Barristan and others from her side, heedless of whether it endangered her. A man who lived only to please women, who acted rashly without thought, could never truly be loyal to Quen. Bringing him under his banner served many purposes. Training pirates was only one of them. Quen turned from the harbor and summoned Jelena. Together they climbed the steep path up to the summit of Torturer's Deep. The sea wind cut sharp and cold, heavy with salt as it struck their faces. Far below, the deep blue water stretched like endless silk, breaking into white spray against jagged reefs. Facing into the gale, Quen's voice carried clear. Jelena, why do you think we managed to take Torturer's Deep that day? Her silver hair whipped in the wind. After a brief silence, she answered coolly, her words steady. Our success lay in Crab Claw's arrogance. He thought luring us inside would allow him to crush us in one stroke. Had we been without magic, without the dragon soul guards, perhaps he would have succeeded. If he had barred us outside instead of letting us enter, this stronghold's cliffs would have made it unassailable, unless you became a dragon yourself. Just so. Quen nodded, his gaze sweeping the reefs below, a natural barrier where the currents swirled dark and treacherous. It shows we must never underestimate these pirates. They've ruled the stepstones for years, they must have their own strengths. With our magic limited, caution is vital. He pointed to the faint black shadows shifting beneath the waves. Without Roro, those reefs alone could undo us. Turning back to Jelena, his tone sharpened with command. In the coming days, I need you to lead the Dragon Soul Guards and a portion of the pirates. Stretch chains across the reefs, sealing the gaps so only one passage remains. And the chain gate at the cracked channel must be rebuilt. The current defense is too crude. We'll raise a stone arch there, with heavy gates and, above them, mounted scorpions. It must become a true choke point. If enemies come, we fall back behind the arch and strike from cover. Jelena listened intently, her violet eyes catching the sea and sky as she fixed every detail in memory. When he finished, she gave a simple reply. Understood. Then she turned, descending swiftly along the cliff path to see the orders carried out. Chapter 44. Taking the offensive. Half a month later, in the sea-eroded hall of Torturer's Deep. Roro Uhoris burst in, travel-worn and weary. Inside, only Quen and the ever-present Jelena were waiting. Quen set aside the Valyrian steel sword he had been polishing, his sharp gaze cutting over Roro's sweat-shined face. Roro, why such a delay? Quen asked. Roro drew a breath, wiped his brow, but his eyes gleamed with excitement. Lord, the trip to Spear Handle village wasn't wasted. I brought back the repair materials you asked for, and managed to secure some heavy crossbows and catapults as well. He lowered his voice, a smug note creeping in. And there was a real prize. Merchants brought in fine timber from the Seven Kingdoms, perfect for building large ships. The price was right, so I bought up a batch. What's more, I found a few shipwrights from Tyrosh, good craftsmen, who were being hounded over gambling debts. I managed to talk and scare them into coming with me. After gulping from his waterskin, he went on. With supplies and men in hand, I followed your orders. I spread the word in taverns and at the docks, that Torturer's Deep had a new master. I made it sound convincing, told them we'd just taken over, still sorting through Kago's scraps, drowning in work. A sly grin tugged at his lips. Didn't expect the news to spread faster than the sea breeze. I'd barely sailed out with the fleet when a few sneaky ships started tailing me. They flew Jawbreak Island's tattered banner. Those bastards don't even bother hiding their plundering, wanting the whole world to know they're Kago's mad dogs. Took me no small effort, weaving through reef channels, to finally lose them. Quen tapped the armrest of the rough stone chair with his fingers. You're certain? They were Jawbreak men. I'd know them even in ashes, Roro swore with a hard nod. That scarred face on the lead ship, Kago's own man. So, Kago has his nose stretched this far, already eyeing Torturer's Deep. Quen's eyes narrowed in thought. But the question is, will this mad shark dare to bite? Lord, let me go, Roro urged, his eyes flashing with the thrill of a hunter. East of Jawbreak Island lies Razor Reef, treacherous currents, rocks sharp as knives packed thick. But I know passages not even ghosts could chart. I'll linger there, look like a patrolling fool or a fat sheep strayed from the flock. If that brute Kago can't resist, he'll send ships after me. Once they follow me into the reef. He mimed a closing circle with his hands. That's our slaughterhouse. Lo Quen's brow creased. Kago, is he truly that reckless? The memory of Crab Claw's trap at Torturer's Deep was still fresh. He dared not underestimate pirate lords who had lived their lives steeped in blood. But after a moment's hesitation, he gave his decision. Your plan is worth trying. But we wait until our ships are repaired. He turned to the silver-armored guard at his side. Jelena, you will remain here at Torturer's Deep. Guard it well. Jelena inclined her head silently. With the fine timber Roro had brought, skilled Tyroshi shipwrights, and ample supplies, repairs at the harbor surged ahead. The three captured OOA Red War galleys, the Nest of the Crab and her two smaller sisters, Reefbreaker and Abyssal Stranglehold, along with a dozen smaller oared ships, lay in the makeshift docks like wounded sea beasts. Craftsmen directed sailors as they replaced rotting ribs and planks with oak and ironwood, planed down rough edges, carved mortise and tenon joints, and sealed the seams with boiling fish glue and tung oil. The clang of hammers, the rasp of saws, and the shouts of shipwrights filled the days and nights, the air thick with the tang of fresh shavings and oil. For half a month, Lo Quen waited like a crouching beast within Torturer's Deep, prepared for Kago's strike. Yet from Jawbreak Island came no move. Not even a scout ship appeared. The pirates were no fools. To storm Torturer's Deep, they would have to brave the narrow crack channel and the clifftop defenses, enough to bleed any attacker white. A siege to starve them out was just as impossible. The warm bay within was a natural fishery, its stockpiles of dried fish piled high. At the cliff's base, rainwater gathered into clear pools, ensuring a steady supply of fresh water. At last, after weeks of relentless work, Lo Quen's fleet emerged renewed. The massive double-hulled warship, the Nest of the Crab, stood tall once again, its masts towering into the sky. Heavy crossbows and catapults newly mounted on its fore and aft decks crouched like steel beasts, radiating deadly menace. The other two war galleys had likewise regained their former might. Even the medium-sized oared vessels, though humble, had been patched, fitted with ballistae and catapults of varying sizes. Crude as they were, they now carried a fierce, rugged air. Lo Quen stepped onto the solid deck of the Nest of the Crab. Roro followed at his back, introducing, Lord, this is the Nest of the Crab, once Kago's flagship. Now it's yours. Excellent. Lo Quen's gaze swept across the fleet. Roro, the fleet is ready. Carry out the plan. Yes, my lord. A sharp light gleamed in Roro's eyes. He quickly summoned his 500 hardened pirates to board the fastest, shallowest draft-oared ships. With supplies and water replenished, the ships shot out of Torturer's Deep like arrows loosed from the string, racing toward the Razor Reef east of Jawbreak Island. Lo Quen, meanwhile, led Jorah Mormont, 1,000 pirate infantry, and 500 silent dragon soul guards aboard the main warships and remaining oared vessels, trailing far behind Roro's flotilla. Esser Jorah, Lo Quen said to the Bear Island knight beside him, his face still dark, once Roro has lured the fish into the net, we strike from both sides. Leave none alive. Jorah gave only a low grunt in reply, his eyes drifting unwillingly toward the direction of Torturer's Deep, toward the bond he could not sever. The sun blazed overhead, its scorching rays baking the sea until the air steamed with suffocating heat, heavy with the stench of salt. Roro's small ships swaggered along the outer edge of Razor Reef, even edging close to Jawbreak Island's patrol lines in open provocation. Sure enough, within half a day, 3 patrol boats flying Jawbreak Island's flag closed in like sharks drawn by blood. They did not attack at once. One vessel broke off and sped away, clearly to carry word, while the other 2 shadowed Roro's ships at a measured distance, neither closing in nor falling back. Time crawled in the tense pursuit, the sea and sky slowly sinking into dusk. Roro followed his planned course, guiding the pursuers steadily toward the jagged maze of reefs where dangerous currents churned. Yet the 2 enemy ships still only trailed, making no move to attack or summon reinforcements. A chill breeze swept across the flagship's deck, and unease spread through Lo Quen's mind like ink clouding clear water. Beside him, Jorah Mormont's brow was furrowed so tightly it seemed knotted. His rough fingers rubbed the hilt of his sword unconsciously, his deep voice carrying the weight of instinct. Something's wrong. They're buying time. Where are their reinforcements? Where is Kago's main force? A thought flashed through Lo Quen's mind like lightning, and a cold dread seized him. Damn it. Up to 50 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com/BlurryDream. Chapter 45, Ambush and Counterambush. He spun around, his voice taut with a sharp urgency. They're holding us here. Kago's main force has likely already gone to strike our stronghold. Jorah's face went pale. Linus was still inside Torturer's Deep. Torturer's Deep is easy to defend and hard to storm. Could they really take it? He forced himself to steady, his tone turning analytical. There are only 1,000 men guarding it now. Kago must believe we've emptied our nest, leaving it hollow within. Quen's words came fast. Turn back at once. Full speed. He barked the order toward Roro's fleet ahead. The signal flagman instantly raised the urgent retreat signal. The fleet wheeled about in the night, heavy oars thrashing the sea, carving frantic white wakes as they raced back toward Torturer's Deep. The ocean lay smothered in black ink. Sparse stars pricked the sky, the moon smothered by heavy clouds. Only the lanterns at the bows flickered faintly in the vast darkness, like drifting fireflies. Distant reefs loomed like ghostly shadows, rising and falling with the waves. Quen stood on the stern deck, forcing calm as his mind raced through every possibility of Kago's design. The defenses of Torturer's Deep, Jelena holding command, Kago's cunning, then a darker thought surfaced. No. His voice cut through the tension. Kago may not be aiming for Torturer's Deep at all. Even with just 1,000 men, Jelena could hold them for a time behind our fortifications. If they attacked and we returned, they'd be trapped in the cracked channel, crushed from front and rear. That would be suicide. A flash of understanding lit Jorah's clouded eyes. You mean, their real target is us? An ambush along the way back. Exactly. Quen's gaze slashed across the Black Sea like a blade. Roro, the fastest route home, where's the best ground for an ambush? Roro had already bent over the sea chart. By the faint lamplight, his finger stabbed at a mark. The tidal reefs, my lord. We passed them earlier today. By day, when the tide's high, the waters are deep enough to pass. But at night, when it ebbs. His voice broke off. His old, clouded eyes widened as he sucked in a sharp breath. At low tide, vast reefs break the surface, perfect cover for hiding ships. Just so. A cold smile touched Quen's lips. Clever, shipbreaker. Not as stupid as he looks, waiting for us to sail straight into his jaws. Order the helm, hard starboard. Abandon the main channel. Take us wide, swing around, and I'll strike him from behind. Under Roro's sure guidance, the fleet slipped ghost-like through the night, circling wide to creep upon the tidal reefs from the rear. The tidal reefs. The night lay ink-dark. With the tide gone out, the reef bared its jagged teeth. Black rocks jutted like the fangs of some ancient beast, piercing the waves, gleaming faintly wet and cold under the thin light of the moon. Dozens of oared ships of all sizes lurked like venomous snakes, silent in the reef's shadows. 5 great double-decked war galleys squatted like sea monsters. On the towering stern of one, the massive figure of Kago the shipbreaker melded with the night. Barek-ested, he gripped a heavy double-bladed axe, its edge catching now and then with a glint of cold light. Kago, shouldn't they be here by now? Muttered a gaunt, leather-armored captain at his side, his voice laced with impatience. Kago's single eye flared in a glare, but his mouth split in a cruel grin, showing yellowed teeth. What's the hurry? Those pups are still tangled by our ships at Razor Reef, running like headless flies. Wait. When they're desperate to get home and sail right into our arms, hey. He hefted his axe. I'll make oars for our fleet from their ship planks. The gaunt man chuckled darkly. That's the brilliance of it. They'll think we've gone to raid their den, and rush back in panic. Never dreaming we're lying in wait along their only way home. Once we sink a few, the rest, his grin widened. The rest will be ours to carve. Even as they whispered, savoring the slaughter to come, a vast shadow stirred from the deep waters beyond the reef. It moved like a phantom, silent and immense. It was Quen's main fleet. Shielded by reefs and night, they had finished their encirclement. Fire! Quen's cold command rang from the stern deck of the Nest of the Crab. The flag-bearer snapped his signal flag downward. Woo! Thrum! A shrill whistle tore through the silence of the night. The catapults, long primed, bellowed with a thunderous roar. Massive stones screamed through the darkness, smashing into the dense knot of enemy ships nestled within the reef. At the same time, the heavy crossbows loosed bolts as thick as a man's arm. Carrying terrifying force, they shrieked through the air, striking true at enemy masts and waterlines. Boom! Crack! Splash! Disaster fell in an instant. A Jawbreak Island vessel's mast was split clean in two by a stone the size of an ox. The collapsing sails and rigging crashed down, crushing the men beneath into pulp. A heavy bolt punched through the waterline of a double-decked galley, seawater surging into the hull in torrents. The reef erupted into chaos, shattered hulls groaning, timbers splintering, dying screams rising and merging into a nightmarish chorus. Kago reeled for a heartbeat under the sudden onslaught, then rage consumed him. Enemy attack. Torturers deep dogs. They've flanked us. Warriors, hold fast. Ram them, sink them. His lone eye blazed red, blood vessels bursting as he roared like a beast. The raw savagery of Jawbreak Island's pirates exploded forth. Shipbreaker, Kago's name had been forged in the ram. Every warship under him bore a reinforced prow, its bronze-tipped ram sharpened like a spearhead, the hull specially braced for impact. At his bellow, the surviving ships lunged like wounded sharks. Oarsmen roared in frenzy, their blades churning the sea like whirling wheels. The galleys twisted free of the reef, ignoring the danger of rocks, and surged forward with terrifying speed, mad with a suicidal ferocity, straight for Quen's fleet. Their aim was clear: strike the weaker oared ships, tear the formation apart with brute force. On the stern deck, Quen's hawk-like gaze swept over the onrushing enemy fleet, hunting for Kago's flagship. The dragonbone bow was already in his grip, the cold weapon thrumming with a hunger for blood. One arrow, if it found that massive figure, could end this battle. But then, a thick cloud swallowed what little moonlight there was. Darkness deepened. Enemy outlines blurred, indistinguishable shadows on the sea. Damn it! Quen spat. The black arrows of the dragonbone bow were priceless, he couldn't squander them on blind shots. The enemy fleet surged nearer, rams glinting with lethal promise even in the dark. Quen knew there would be no avoiding it now. The clash would be steel on steel, blood on deck. Jorah. Roro. Prepare to board. Fight to the death. His roar cut above the howl of the sea wind.